It's a brand new day, day 2 of PodFest Asia, third virtual event. And breakfast session is now kicking off. We're going to be talking to Lindsay Graham, who is the Webby Award-winning host of the podcast American History Tellers, American Scandal, and American Elections Wicked Game. And he's also the executive producer of the audio dramas 1865 and Terms. So he's a podcast producer, sound designer, and composer who has worked on Dirty John, Dr. Death, Batch, Business Wars, The Lead, and others, reaching tens of millions of listeners. He's also the host of the Business Movers podcast on the Wondery Podcast Network. So without further ado, we'll introduce Lindsay. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm great. I've been doing this podcast festival since a night and a half ago. So I'm still wide awake for some super strange reason. I'm energized by, all these great stories and, of course, good guests that are on this festival. So you're the next one. I'm super glad that you're here with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I know it's a bit early where you are.
Yeah, it's just 5 minutes past 6 a.m. So calling this the breakfast session. So thanks for agreeing to do this. So it's really a great honor. And we know that you're doing so much great work through your production company, Airship. And so we know that one of your mantra, or should I say purpose and mission, is to seek to expand human understanding and empathy through audio storytelling. So maybe we'll just jump right straight into our first question. How much in advance are your episodes actually scheduled? Because you have so many shows, right? And of course, you have this great show on the Wondery Network as well. So in order to make sure that you aren't going to miss a show release, how much in advance do you have to prepare your shows?
Well, they're weekly shows, so they're scheduled every week. They're going to come out. So I've got one due Monday, one due Tuesday, one due Wednesday to air the next day. So how far in advance we get started on them? It's a large process. There's many people involved. But when I receive a script, it's usually just a week ahead. So I'll be working, 6 or 7 days ahead of publishing. So it's not a lot of time to get it all done. But it's at this point with 3 shows and a 4th soon, season 2 of 1865 is coming up. We're keeping ourselves busy.
This is great. I think busy is it's great news, definitely. That means that you're in high demand and your shows are great because your listeners love to find out what's the development of the next episode, or maybe they follow this religiously, and it's very exciting for them to find out other shows that you have as well. So in part of World Asia, we definitely love to put a spotlight on great podcast shows like yours. So we want to ask you, do you ever feel like you dialogue in your head, just like you do on Tellers?
No, I really don't. I do try to bring realism to the dialogue. So maybe it's the other way around. I try and these little moments that happen in my podcast, these reenactment moments, I try to make them as earnest and real as possible. So that requires me inhabiting the characters a little bit. I mean, I suppose that's acting, right? But no, I don't take these characters with me after I leave the studio. And I certainly don't have a narrator going around and now he cuts the onions.
This is great. And we want to know also, your gear setup, right? Like I have a Rodecaster Pro, I have a pod mic. So are you using more advanced equipment to make your sounds, go up to the next level? And of course, recently there's been a lot of news announced even by the likes of iHeartRadio, right? They're like releasing and publishing new shows that are in 3D immersive audio. What do you think about this development?
Oh, I think it's interesting. I don't know. It's a very niche thing. Maybe for audio drama, it's important. And I can think of some other shows that are very rich soundscapes that might need it too. But for the vast majority, 99.8% of podcasts, I think immersive 3D audio or ambisonics or binaural audio isn't necessary or needed. It's neat. We saw a lot of this in the film world. Like 3D movies came out and became a thing. IMAX is a thing. They're available, but you wouldn't watch the nightly news in IMAX 3D, right?
That's a really good point. And of course, the equipment, I've seen pictures of it. It looks really incredible and probably way too expensive. Like no podcasters actually want to go broke, right? But actually investing in those equipment that you don't really need. What we really want to hear are great storytelling. And I think your shows are able to achieve that without all these fancy gear setup. So exactly how many quarter-inch cables do you have in the studio and in your home?
Oh, too many. I mean, this is as you can see, there's some instruments behind me. So this is my studio. It doubles as my podcast studio. As there's a whole nother room and a music studio. So I've got more stuff than I know what to do with. In terms of cables, 40, 80. I don't know. But I probably have about 24 microphones. And yeah, it's built for something more than just podcasting with one voice.
This is really interesting because you're a musician, I assume. You play music with your band?
No, I don't have a band, but I do compose music. All the music in my podcasts are composed by me.
So you wrote those music, you recorded those music, yeah, and you released them in your podcast show. So any plans to actually, venture into that territory where you actually release songs and music, or even film scores, soundtracks, etc. on all these incredible film, for example?
I probably at a different time would have loved to do more composing work. It's very hard. It's the hardest thing I do, probably. But at this point, I'm so satisfied and busy with the podcasting that composing for a new show like Business Movers is just a treat that I get to do every once in a while. I don't think I could switch gears and make it my career, although that's probably where I really wanted to go when I was younger.
It's fascinating to me because I hardly, know of any podcasters who are also composing their own music for their podcast shows. So, what actually inspired you, or was it an idea that you came up with, or it's like based on a partner or a client demand that you make your own or compose your own music for this podcast? Who gave you the idea to actually, build the songs and the soundtrack for your shows?
Well, I think many of your listeners or those tuning in will understand that podcasting is largely a do-it-yourself enterprise. It's DIY from start to finish. So if you can be the voice and the writer and the sound designer and the musician, then why not? In fact, in the early days, you have to be. So it's up to you to determine whether you're good enough to do it. I don't know if I actually thought about that too much. I just figured I could. And it was that combination of music and sound design and voice that in my audio drama terms that got me attention from Wondery and kind of started me down my career path.
This is great. And I always admire people who are able to engineer, sound design, host a show, interview, write a script, edit it down, and do everything on your own. And so we're really fascinated by in terms of how, more than just your gear setup, right? What do you use exclusively for all recording, editing, sound design, and composing for your podcast?
Sure. Well, I'll run down my signal chain real fast. This is a Neumann U87. You don't need that microphone. Yours is just fine. And it runs into, right now, it's running into a Rupert Neve Shelford channel. You don't need that either. And then it goes into an interface, a UA Apollo interface, into a PC. I'm all PC. I don't use Macs, mainly because I can build them myself and save a few dollars. And then I record, edit, and compose everything in an audio program called Reaper, which is really eminently inexpensive. It's $60 for a full license for non-commercial independent work. And it is powerful. It is, I don't know why anyone would choose it, Pro Tools over Reaper. So it does everything I need it to. Probably it's overpowered for just podcasting. But since I do sound design and music composition as well, it suits me well.
because you mentioned Rupert Neve, and I think he was recently in the news, right?
Yeah, passed just
Passed
recently.
away. So we agree that he's the Steve Jobs for his realm, for this vertical, or for kickstarting, this music recording process as well, and with the right equipment.
Yeah, there's certainly something to be said about that. Rupert Neve was a person who developed a very particular sound and way of designing audio engineering tools, and he did it early in the '60s, and he's been doing it ever since. And there's nothing that meets that level of sound or quality. Quite a few other companies, have a similar claim to fame, like API or something else. But yeah, Rupert Neve will live forever.
I remember I came across his name right in that documentary that Dave Grohl from Nirvana, Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
I think he made that documentary, and that was the first time I've seen for myself. In Sound City, right, there's a Rupert Neve console, right, and that's like a collectible item right now. And since his death, right, I think like it's even harder for a collector to actually track one down, right? There's only like so few of them around the world, maybe like 2 or 3. Is that right?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, those are the vintage era consoles. He made quite a few, and worked with several companies. Actually, many podcasters will be familiar with Focusrite, which is a company that he either co-founded or was certainly intimately involved with. So yeah, he's been with quite a few companies. Neve is his first one, and Rupert Neve Designs is his last one. But those Neve consoles from the '60s and '70s, they have a certain collectible je ne sais quoi about them.
Yeah, 100%. I remember all my favorite iconic albums from the 90s. Just name a few: Nirvana, Nevermind, Tools, Undertow, Rage Against the Machine. I think the self-titled album, Fleetwood Mac, Rumors. Right? They all recorded on that same console. So when you mentioned his name, suddenly my eyes just lit up, because that's definitely someone that I would like to talk about more, because I'm not very knowledgeable about what has actually contributed in the world of audio engineering specifically, but in terms of also like casting space as well. So do you have any stories to share about Rupert Neve?
Oh, I don't think I do really. I can tell you that what he's famous for in audio engineering, the electrical engineering, this is geeky stuff, but is his use of transformers, and it makes his equipment really heavy and quite expensive, instead of moving on to IC chips and other things. But these transformers, they introduce a certain distortion. It's not really high fidelity. It's not low fidelity either, but there's just a certain adds layers of harmonics and meatiness to the sound that's a lot of musicians really latched onto and said that's what I want my music to sound like. And then of course these consoles have 24, 48, 96 channels on them, so every single one of them has 3 transformers in them, so all the music gets soaked through these custom wound pieces of magnet and wire, and out the other end comes this thickening to the sound. So that's generally why people enjoy it so much.
Yeah, and that's why a documentary was made, to put a spotlight on this cool equipment gear, or should I say, these are all the vintage gear. And it'd be great if I could visit the museum one day, actually, take a picture together with this console. I think that would be a classic moment, or a micro moment to cherish.
Yeah.
Maybe we're going to be talking about Rupert Neve for the entire segment of this festival. Let's maybe talk about your coolest, experience, especially you're on Twitter a lot, I noticed. So what are some of the coolest reviews that you received for your podcast, and what are the most idiotic ones?
Oh, well, I recently retweeted one of the ones that I enjoyed most, and that's probably what you saw recently. It was an early review of History Tellers, in which a father, wrote in and mentioned that he had an estranged relationship with his son, and the family had divorced, and he didn't want to stay at his dad's house anymore, and he was young, 13, something like that. And so, classic mopey teenager stuff. But his dad didn't know what to do. And so in one of these trips in which he picks up his son, he just starts playing my podcast, American History Tellers. And the son perks up and asks, "What's this?" And it's a podcast I've been listening to, and they listen to it for a little bit. And then, the next time the son asks, "Hey, can we listen to more of that podcast?" And pretty soon, this is something that becomes a thing for father and son to talk about. And they pause it and talk about the events. And all of a sudden, this kid is brought out of his shell and has something to talk to his dad about. And I thought, gosh, I probably could quit now and be really happy if I brought this one family together. But there've been others like it. People who just make it family listening time. And that's really fulfilling.
This is an incredible story. And if I had a show where, my listener brought this review back to me, I'll probably, tear up. Or it's that kind of wins that we are all looking for as podcasters, right? We're not so, big on the money side or other, accolades. We are more interested in how you actually touch people's lives. And I think bringing the family together through your storytelling on your awesome podcast, that's one of the big wins for you as well, yeah?
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, absolutely. I want to hear every single one of those stories, every single one of them.
Do you want to reveal what are the most idiotic ones that you received as well?
Oh, I'm sure almost all podcasters get the troll reviews, especially the ones that complain about things that are well out of my control, like too many ads, or I can't seem to figure out how to download it. I mean, user error all over the place. But many, it's really frustrating to me, especially for those podcasts that are American history or politics centered, to get back-to-back comments that seem to indicate that I'm too conservative or too liberal. No one's happy. And the thing to do if you're a podcaster with an audience of any size is just remember that the people who are really loud aren't all the people. They're really on the edges, and you have to tamp that down and not take it so personally. It's hard. No one likes to be told that you're an idiot or a shill or whatever that you might be called. But those are on the margins. Hopefully the vast majority of people are listening to your content for the right reasons.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And in terms of what you just shared, right, to not be too obsessed with like the reviews as well, because sometimes the good ones doesn't mean that our shows are like a perfect show. Yeah, or you receive a really bad reviews, it doesn't mean that it's as bad as it seems as well. So to always take that with a pinch of salt, especially on social media, we have to be careful. Yeah. What are the wins for both you and your listeners for your new show, Wondery Presents Business Movers Podcast? And what did you learn from hosting this 4-episode series on Walt Disney's efforts to create a second theme park that would actually correct the errors of his first?
Yeah, so that was the first topic of this new podcast, ongoing podcast, Business Movers. It's like my other shows. It'll be weekly, and we'll take 4 or 5 weeks to investigate some topic. This show is a business show and not an American history show like many of my others. So we look into the iconic people and events behind some of the biggest businesses on the globe. One of them, of course, is Disney, and but we looked at a moment in time in the Disney Corporation when Walt Disney was still alive, and he had this amazing aspiration to build a city of tomorrow in Florida that included a theme park, but his vision was much bigger than that, and so he had success eventually at Disneyland in California, and wanted to take those lessons and just scale it up. But at the same time, he ran into a lot of problems. His health was failing. And so it was a poignant time in his life and critical in the company's history, too, because this is when they got big. Disney World is really pretty much the epicenter of Disney from then on. And even though he was on TV and doing movies for years, this is kind of where the growth machine really started. So it was a great series. I learned a lot about Walt Disney as a person and as an entrepreneur. And then we moved on to the next series, which was about New Coke. So we left the 60s and went to the 80s and investigated how and why Coca-Cola decided to bring out this new version of their soft drink and and how they handled the backlash.
This is really fascinating, and even for audiences in Asia, right? It resonates with them because we're so familiar with these brands. These are global brands, and just want to maybe touch on Disney, right? Recently, Disney Plus just landed in Singapore.
Yep.
In fact, just 2 nights ago. I've been eagerly waiting for this moment because I wanted to watch the movie so much, and of course there are so many great other content, right, on the this OTT platform. So, what are your personal favorites, from this plus in terms of like favorite shows? What are some of the shows that inspire you to even adapt some part of it, or maybe inspire you to do an episode, on certain topics that you learn or you've watched on Disney Plus?
Oh, I don't know that Disney Plus has informed my podcasting much, but I will tell you that I certainly watched all of The Mandalorian. That's for sure. And I also watched Soul. A funny thing about that, there is a connection to podcasting. One of the voice actors that plays, I think, the principal in the school there, she was a voice actor on my very first podcast, audio drama Terms. So it was great to see her name in lights as the credits roll in a Disney Plus production. But in general, though, I think Disney's doing a great job of storytelling. You can learn so much from just how they structure and pace things. And I'm always paying attention to how stories well told are constructed. I want to take every lesson I can from anything. And, you can take a lot of lessons from movies and apply them to podcasts.
And we are seeing a trend, I think slowly but sure developing as well. Instead of many adaptations from books, right? We're seeing Netflix shows being based on podcast shows as well. So do you have any dream of having some of your shows being converted to a TV show or maybe a film and that's going to be replayed and accessible to everybody around the world, either on Netflix or on Disney Plus as well?
Sure. I think anyone would have dreams of that. But being in the audio drama space in particular, it would be wonderful if you with the season 2 of 1865, especially coming out in a month and a half, it would be great I would love to see that story told on the big screen, something like either in a movie form, like Spielberg's Lincoln, or in a series. I think any one of these companies could do great justice to this story. And it would be fantastic to be part of that process, to take something that was, done in my backyard and then suddenly see it broadcast across the world. It would be a fantastic achievement.
That would be so wonderful, right? So we have 5 more minutes, and before we let you go, right, we definitely want to ask you, how did you get started doing podcasting and all these projects that you're embarking on right now? Yeah. So what kickstarted this journey?
Well, I've always been interested in storytelling of some sort. I had a podcast back in 2005, right when they first started. It was a local music podcast. Me and a buddy would talk about local bands because that's what we were interested in. That pod faded, right? And we went on to other things. But throughout the years, I remained a musician and a composer, and I was tightly knit with the local theater and film community. I worked with quite a few of them on all sorts of different aspects. So storytelling through some sort of medium, and especially paying attention to the audio, was something that I did with, I guess, a hobby of mine. Until 2015, 16, in which I had an opportunity. I say opportunity. I was fired from my regular job, so I decided to see if I could make audio a real career. And I started a company with another person who's looking for an opportunity to do something in audio. And we started as an audiobook company, recording audiobooks for Audible and others. But we shifted and produced this podcast, Terms. It was that audio drama that caught the ear of Hernan Lopez at Wondery, and really began my career. From that, he called me a year after that podcast was done, and just asked would I like to be the host of American History Tellers, this idea for a show he had. So we took several months of emailing back and forth and a few calls, and soon I was working with a producer at Wondery, and we kind of figured out what this show was going to be. It was a lot of fun. I had no idea what was going to happen. Certainly did not expect it to hit number 1 on iTunes. And once that happened, then just it accelerated from there. So I feel very fortunate that I got recognized by Wondery and kind of picked up out of oblivion. But I've worked hard to take advantage of every opportunity since then.
What are your podcast superhero stories? As in, who are your favorite podcasters? And what really ignited your passion about music, composing, and podcasting?
I've got to point back to the kind of the OG podcast, which of course was a radio show, but This American Life really opened my ears, I guess, and my mind to what could be done in just audio. I had flirted with photography before, and I had certainly was always a musician. But when I heard This American Life and how structured it was and how poignant and just impactful, emotionally charged a 3-act 1-hour radio show could be, I was really enamored and always wanted to do something like that. It never occurred to me that I actually would end up doing something like that, although my shows are very different from This American Life. But it began there. It was a realization that the right pace, the right voice, the right music, the right story, the right structure all mattered and came together and built something that was really something to be cherished.
It's amazing hearing you, recount all these experiences and, how you started, and of course, who inspired you exactly. So, it's so great to have you gracing our event, and it's such a huge honor as well to have a chart topper podcaster with a show that's number 1, actually gracing our event, our Podcast Asia. So we definitely like to re-invite you back in the future and maybe talk about your new shows as well, what you've been up to, what's cooking, and it'll be interesting to see how you further develop, and maybe one day we'll see one of those shows that you made in your backyard, like you said, right, appearing on our Disney Plus or Netflix as well. So we're eagerly waiting for that to happen one day. You never know, right? So thank you so much again. Any last message for our Asian audiences here?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, and I'd be glad to come on again. But for everyone paying attention, podcasting is hard, but it's really wonderful. And if pay attention to the craft of it, I guess I would tell everyone. You can always make your show better, and if you do, more people will listen.
Fantastic. This is such a great way to close this session. Thank you so much, Lindsay, and I'll see you again really, really soon, hopefully. And please take care of yourself over there, and take care of each other, yeah?
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you.
See you. Bye-bye. Lindsay Graham, founder of Airship, and he has so many brilliant podcasts. Go check them out. And my next guest is also by the name of Lindsay. It's a different Lindsay Padilla. Hopefully, I pronounced her name correctly. So let's maybe get her on, and we will find out whether did I read your name correctly.
No, you didn't. It's Padilla like tortilla.
Padilla, Lindsay Padilla. Yeah. So I'm really, really sorry. I always screw up reading names wrongly. So thank you for correcting me. How have you been? And I think we did a Clubhouse session. Just we were on stage at the same time, 2 weeks ago. That was during Lunar New Year, I remember, day 1 or day 2. So that was a great session. That was a great room that you moderated.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. I'm loving Clubhouse. It's super fun.
And what have you been up to, ever since you moderated this really cool room? Are you still on Clubhouse like every single day and starting new rooms?
Close, almost every single day. I don't know if you went through this, but when the app first came out, I was on a lot. And then it was like, okay, I think I'm going to have to, create some boundaries and create a timeline. So I probably host, I think I'm around 3 to 4 rooms a week. And I'll randomly do one here or there if I get invited, but that I'm pretty structured now. So I'm very strategic. I don't spend all my time on it as I was in the beginning.
I'm kind of like, glad that I've scheduled this festival end of this month, because that means I can get some Clubhouse detox.
Yeah.
And finally put my phone down and not be bothered when someone is pinging me or there's a notification showing that there's so many cool people right there. I actually go and listen to it. For fear of missing out. Right?
Bill Gates was on last night, I think. I don't know if you caught that.
I missed that because I was doing this festival. So I'm glad I missed that.
Yeah. Always something crazy.
Yeah, if we did a marathon session, I'll be on that platform or on Clubhouse for 4 hours listening to him straight. And that could be like a really deep rabbit hole that we don't really want to go into. So we're all sharing the same benefits of Clubhouse right now. It's such a great app, though.
It really is. I'll say this. Yes, I might do a 4-hour room, but now I get on the Peloton bike. I'm working out while I'm doing it. So that's kind of cool. So I do try to do, or I'll do the dishes. So it's not like I'm glued to a screen. So there is that about audio that's really helpful.
And I actually have another hack, right? It's like, if I'm going to spend my time in Clubhouse, I better run my festival on it. So next month, we're going to stop doing this, on-camera thing. We're going to do it completely on Clubhouse. So it actually justifies spending that time there, because I'll be putting a spotlight on cool people in this space, right? Including you. And maybe we'll be inviting you to present a room.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
That'll be fun, right? So let's, it's a date.
It's a date.
It's a date. So we're going to start by diving into the questions prepared for you. What does the power of audio in business actually mean?
Ooh, yeah. So the power of audio in business, I kind of alluded to it already with Clubhouse, right? So that was a great opener because it does allow us to multitask. And I think if we know anything about humans right now in the world that we live in today, we will pay for convenience. We will be addicted to things that are convenient. If Amazon Prime shows us anything. And so I think audio is convenient. I think it is the most convenient way to consume content. So reading and watching this and tuning in live and having to have your eyes on this takes a lot more effort than listening. And so I think what it means for business is that if you're not thinking about how to incorporate audio in your business, you're missing out on that landscape of intention. And people who podcast know that their listeners are loyal. They listen to, every episode. They listen to most of the episode. And that means that there's a huge opportunity for people who have businesses, people who maybe run their own, business themselves, but, they have the opportunity to start a podcast and grow a loyal audience because those people are tuned in. And there's, I think, some psychological things happening a little bit. Like, it is really powerful that you're in someone's head, like in their ears. There is something about that sense that is different than eyes. I'm looking and I'm watching us, but like, I can't touch you. I can't, right? Like it feels like a little, like there's something between us, but there's something about listening that it feels like that goes away. And we're experiencing that on Clubhouse. Like the fact that I'm agreeing to hang out with you, like I've talked to you in a room and hung out with you and saw connections that you were making, and I wanted to be a part of what you were doing. That's faster. If you had sent me an email by itself, I don't know. You know what I mean? So there's something very intimate about audio. And so I think businesses will need to start to think about, what does my brand sound like? where do I show up in audio form? And I think that we're kind of coming into this new like renaissance. I think there's going to be a lot more audio happening coming from businesses, not just video.
And we know that they are contributing to, this the usage of using the power of audio in business, and you're forwarding that because you were an ex-community college professor, right? So
Yep.
you accidentally started a business while on the tenure track, and now as the CEO and co-founder of the Hello Audio Community Software, which tell us more about this software. Does it take that content and actually create private audio feeds to make learning on the go much easier for your people?
Yeah. So Hello Audio, in knowing that audio is going to be important for businesses coming up, we're realizing that, distributing that audio is something that people need. So whether it's Podfest or, Podcast Asia, and your, people aren't catching this live and not watching the video, what would a private audio feed look like? And so, we're just thinking about video content can be repurposed to audio and will help people, consume it faster. And so our job at Hello Audio is to show people the different ways that you can use RSS feeds. And that's what we do at Hello Audio is we basically take a feed of the content you drop in there and we deliver it to your people's favorite podcast player. So we do not have a standalone podcast player, which means your content shows right next to, Joe Rogan, if that's what someone listens to, or, Pat Flynn, Smart Passive Income, whatever, your favorite podcasts are, so is your paid content or the content that's important that you learn from. And that's what we wanted to do at Hello Audio. And I think it's important to talk about the difference between a public and a private feed. That's a question I get a lot. So a public feed, people watching this know what that is. That is a podcast. It is something that is searchable. You want to be found. You want millions of people listening. You want to grow your audience. You want to show up in the iTunes, podcast search engine, and Spotify, and Stitcher when someone's looking for you. What private means is we don't want you to find it. It's secret. It's exclusive. So it's not searchable on Google. It's not found in the podcast player. If you're trying to find it on Spotify, it won't be there. And so the use case of it is if I gave you $100 to buy your course or to maybe pay for a ticket to a summit or an event like this, you don't want everyone to be able to get that because someone paid for it. That's the exclusivity part. And so we deliver unique links to people that buy. So if I were to buy a ticket to this event and you had a private podcast feed of it, it would say Lindsay Padilla bought this. And it would send me then Lindsay Padilla's personal URL that when I click on it, I can't share it and I can't send it to anyone else. It's only tied to me. So that's like the level of security that we have. So a lot of people are putting their premium content on it. Their $1,000 courses, their tickets to events. We do have some people using it for free things, but in exchange for an email. So, the value is there. Like it is something that someone would feel like they would pay for it, but they get access to this feed. So people are using it as, list builders, right? In email, as a way to collect email addresses, which is a problem for podcasters. Podcasters tend not to know who's listening. We just see that download number, go up every week, every month, hopefully. But we can't really email them or talk to them. And so they have to opt into something. And so that's where the private feed comes in. People opt in for it.
This is exciting. And why running a private audio feed in lieu of a traditional webinar, for example, can actually see a spike in ROI in marketing efforts and also revenue from the series?
Yeah, so we're having a lot of users use it in very unique ways. So, I built it first because of courses. I wanted to listen to the courses that I purchased and I taught people how to make courses. And I was like, man, why aren't there podcast versions of the course? That was the very beginning, early days. Now, fast forward several months in, hundreds of customers later, people are using it in really cool ways. And one of the ways is marketing and on that front end. So maybe they're not charging initially and they're generating buzz around the launch of a course. So some of our users are using it in place of a webinar. So which, is very, what's the word? People are kind of tired of webinars, right? People have seen a lot of them, and they recognize the amount of effort it takes to show up at a certain time and be on camera. And people were loving, that it wasn't a webinar. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad this isn't a webinar. That's how you want your people, your audience coming to you to be. They want you, you want to look innovative, and you want to show your audience that that they're busy, right? And that's what, launching a product or a service via podcast allows you to do. You look different from everyone else who's doing webinars. And so the people that are reporting some of the numbers that are coming back are showing that they're higher conversion rates, higher amount of people going through like the entire process. All those numbers are looking really good, and higher ROI. So some of the ad spend to get someone to, sign up for a private podcast feed versus signing up for a webinar, the cost per click is cheaper. So they're even spending less on that front end. So that ROI numbers show up. So yeah, we're getting a lot of data. The more people experiment with it, the more numbers we're looking at, and case studies we're building out. Emily Hirsch is the one that's on our website, and she's now done it. I think she's done it. Has she done it 2 or 3 times? I think she's done it twice. She's done a podcast series launch twice, and she still hosts a webinar though. So, it's not that webinars don't work, they do, but to get that first amount of content consumed, she's doing it in a podcast series instead of video, and then tends to have a webinar to pull people on. But what's great is, that's what's cool about podcasting, is the consumption rates are higher. I think the number is from 2019, 93% of podcast listeners listen to most or all of an episode, right? So they're not leaving halfway through, they're actually listening. And that's very different than watching a video. I think YouTube, the average number is like around 50%. So already almost double, the amount of the content being consumed, which is really important. So yeah, the people are using it in unique ways, like launching and selling their products.
So are you saying that offering a podcast feed for your virtual summit content is a game changer?
Yeah, that's another way that people are using it. They're adding it to their VIP tickets, their upgrade tickets. And I think summits historically, as you are hosting one live right now, it's a lot of content. Most people can't watch all of it, so they rely on the replays. And the sad part is that most people don't go back and watch the replay because they don't make the time to sit in front of the computer and watch it. And the podcast version just ends up where they are, which is on the go. So they can play it in their car, they can play it walking the dog, versus having to sit at their desktop with all the other distractions. So yes, a use case is summits, and it's very popular. People are setting it up in all different ways. Some people sell it as part of the VIP package. Some people downsell it later. So they'll host the event and say, you missed the event and you didn't buy the ticket. What if I gave you this for $27? So now they've even collected more money after the event is over. So lots of unique, strategies that I think anyone can test depending on their audience and what they want to do. But yes, people are definitely using them for summits.
So it's like another scenario just comes up, right? Like, for example, it's so much easier to access a training or webinar from an app that we use all the time, and not having to log in every single time that we need it, right? So it's definitely like a really good option. And maybe many event organizers, or should I say, all these webinar organizers, they should actually look at this really seriously, and as another way to use a private audio feed as a pay in full for their launch, and then being able to immediately see an increase in pay in fulls.
Yeah, exactly. So we've had people, that's the cool part about audio, I would say, is it's new. So not a lot of people are doing it right now. What we want to be is the standard. We want people to say, I expect there to be a private audio feed in my course or in my summit or whatever, because that's how I watch or get through the content. But what's cool about audio is it's got this perceived value. The value is not in how beautiful your video is. The value is in, can I get the result that you're teaching me, like that you're promising me? That's where the value is. And people are questioning their own ability to complete and do the work. And so when they see the option of a private feed, they're like, whoa, that's so valuable, right? Like I like, you just got rid of the objection that I won't sit down and do the work, which is very common. And I think as somebody who has bought probably hundreds of courses and spent tens of thousands of dollars, maybe even six figures. I haven't added it up, but I've spent a lot of money on training. I have not watched all of it. So when I go to buy something now, having invested that much, I question, am I actually going to do this, right? So if someone has a private feed, I'm like, oh, I can listen. I don't have to watch. So that perceived value is there. And on a sales page, you can add, this thing, and it now makes the thing more valuable. And that's what people are doing. And so when we had Laura, she runs a program that actually teaches people how to launch courses, and she added it to her Pay in Full. And it increased her conversions of Pay in Full. People like when the money comes up, because when people pay in payment plans, sometimes, their cards fail and you can't find them, or they stop paying. And so Pay in Full is good, right? It's a great cash injection. And so if you can increase that number, that just helps with cash flow. And so she went up to, I think, over 70% of her buyers were Pay in Full, which is very high. And so that was a positive. So she attached a podcast feed only to people. It's like a bonus, only to people who paid in full. If you paid on a payment plan, you did not get it. So I think there's lots of unique ways to position it. But what I want the audience to take away is it's a great way to add value to your products as a bonus and use it because there's a high perceived value.
Why is it essential to know who activated their feed, track the downloads, and manage access?
Yeah, good question. So I think as somebody who, has had lots of courses, like I care about where my students are at. I want to see, did they get in, are they going through the material as much as they should be? And so it's a form of tracking. And with public podcasts, like, yes, we track downloads, but again, like I said earlier, we don't know who that download is. So when I see somebody has purchased something, I can then see, oh, that person got access, right? They've listened to this many episodes. And then if they stop paying or they ask for a refund, which happens, you can turn it off so they don't keep getting that amazing content. And so being able to manage the listeners is really important for people when they have paid content on their private feeds.
Thanks for these great sharing. And I think we have a deeper understanding now about your software as well. So tell us how we can actually gain access to Hello Audio.
Yeah, so you can go to helloaudio.fm. We do have free trials there. That's probably the best place to start. Another place is actually in the Facebook group. So we run a Facebook group. You do not have to be a paying user. You do not have to be on a trial. We know that audio is new. We know that private podcasting isn't really common yet. So we want people to be able to hang out in there and see how other people are doing it and feel confident that it's going to work for them and their people. So if you're curious, if I've piqued your interest even a little bit about how a private feed could be beneficial for your business, I encourage you to hang out in the Facebook group. You'll learn from other marketers and other people who are doing really unique things. I've learned from my users so much about how they're being creative with their feeds. And so that is called the Hello Audio Community. If you search that in Facebook, Hello Audio Community, and you'll find it. Probably if you search Hello Audio, you'll see the business page, and the group might come up if you're searching for the group. But that's how you find it. And we would love to have you in there.
So do you have any podcast shows to plug as well?
We're like launching a new one. I'm not going to release the name of it yet. It's not called Hello Audio. It's going to be a little bit different, but the angle is all about people who love audio and how people are using audio and just the world of audio and how it's changing. So I definitely want to have some Clubhouse people on there, some podcasters. And that is not, I've actually not starting recording until March. So it's going to be you'll have to wait and see. I do have an old podcast that I do not make new episodes for, but the content is still really good and very relevant. It's called Wealthy Teachers, and it's all about, I interviewed for well over a year, probably 60 or 70 other educators who started businesses. So if you're a teacher and you want to start a side hustle or start a business, it's pretty inspiring what some of the people I interviewed are doing. So that podcast feed is still live. I just don't record new episodes for it.
Fantastic. Any last message for our audiences in Asia before we let you go?
You know, I'm just excited about where audio is going. So, you know, I think if you haven't started a podcast yet, I think, you know, it is not too late. You have not missed the bus. I think the bus is actually going off like right now. I would start a podcast. I would start diving into the audio space because it is going to be huge, and it is going to be a part of our daily lives is this voice and audio component. And so diving all in and just doing it, I would encourage you to. And I'm sure you're learning a lot from this summit. So take some notes. And I know it's scary to launch a new thing, but it's also really fun. As I was following Lindsay prior, he said that too. Like, you know, it's very rewarding. It can be a lot of work, but it's also really rewarding because your audience is loyal and they know you on just a high level. And so I just encourage people to explore with it because it's such a fun medium.
Fantastic. This is a great way to close this session.
Yeah.
And I look forward to co-moderating a room with you and also jump on stage when you're starting new rooms as well. So I look forward to see you in Clubhouse. Yeah.
Yeah, same. Yeah, keep me posted on the Clubhouse version of PodFest Asia. Happy to be a part.
Most definitely, most definitely. So I'll see you in Clubhouse. Thank you. Bye-bye. Yes. That's Dr. Lindsay Padilla. This time I got the pronunciation right, CEO of Hello Audio. So go check out her website, helloaudio.fm. And we have more guests coming up, but I think I need a toilet break. And I'm going to maybe, stay away from this screen for 5 minutes. So in the meantime, enjoy this particular video that is created by one of our keynote speakers, Jolene Siana, who basically came up with a live music tribute project. So this is a teaser video with no audio yet, but she has collected audio clips from around the world so that it complements this video montage. And this teaser video probably gives you an idea what her live music tribute project is all about. So without further ado, enjoy.
Hey, how's it going? I can't hear you.
I forgot to unmute myself. Can you hear me now? Yes.
I can hear you just fine, yeah.
Fantastic. Where exactly are you? Are you in the UK?
No, I'm in the US. I'm in Berkeley in California at my home. Yeah.
Berkeley.
You?
Fantastic. And I know that you have a fantastic podcast called The One Who Got Away. And I met you in Clubhouse, I think, and sent you a DM, I think, on Instagram. Thanks for agreeing to do this because I think you have a great show, great podcast. And we're here to put a spotlight on podcasters. You're one of those that we really admire because your concept for your podcast is really interesting. Tell us more, about your podcast. How did you get started? And who gave you the idea, actually? Was it you or someone else, or maybe one of your listeners who actually gave you the idea to start this podcast?
Well, I used to live in New Orleans, in Louisiana, and so as many of us know, New Orleans was massively affected by the flooding after Hurricane Katrina many years ago, and there are still the communities are affected by that. The buildings are affected by that. There are many different things that changed in New Orleans after the hurricane. I moved there many years later, so I didn't experience that, but I saw some of the effect on the communities and even the buildings. And there was a particular building that I would walk past in the mornings every day, and it was a house. It was a family home, and it was really run down. And on the side of the building, someone had written in beautiful kind of cursive, "What would you say to the one that got away?" And I thought that was really interesting. So I wrote it down in my notebook. And then several years later, I was invited to do an art project, a very small art project. I had the opportunity, I was commissioned to do it. And so I looked through my notebook for ideas and found this one sentence: "What would you say to the one that got away?" And I love doing artwork with telephones. A lot of my work involves telephone calls because I find them terribly intimate and intense and connecting. And so I decided what would happen if I made a phone number, and you call the number and you're asked one question: "What would you say to the one who got away?" So I set up this phone line. I just wanted really 5 or 10 phone calls. And first I was getting hundreds, and now there have been thousands of calls from all around the world answering that question: "What would you say to the one who got away?"
Do you listen to all the submission that your listeners are providing you? Do you miss each one of them, or do you actually listen through every single one of them?
I'm trying to, but there are really thousands, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of emotional effort as well. And so really the podcast is the listening. That's where we do it together. That's really where it happens. So I don't very intentionally for this podcast, a lot of podcasts, rightfully so, there's a lot of prep beforehand. It's not, or some podcasts, it's not necessarily done entirely live. So if you're doing an interview, you'll do some research and prep some questions. If you're doing a show, like a storytelling show, you'll write the whole script and do all of the research beforehand. And then most of the time when you're doing the show, you'll record it and do a large amount of editing. With The One Who Got Away, it's very different. Everything happens live. There are 2 producers in the background. It's almost like a radio show. It goes out live on Twitch every 2 weeks. I just record it. I don't hear the messages beforehand, and we listen together. And then the producers do a little bit of editing, but the show you hear, if you subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, is the show that was recorded live for the most part.
This is a really interesting concept. And do you think that you can actually use the same concept for other shows that maybe you are conjuring up next?
Yeah, there are some more shows maybe coming. I don't know. I started playing around with the idea. There's an artist who I know who has about 3,000 hours of phone calls between strangers that happen at 3 a.m. He wrote some software that makes the phone ring. Two strangers, the phone rings, they pick up the phone and they're connected to each other and they talk at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. So they wake up and then they're talking and all the calls are recorded. And so he offered to give me access to that. And I've been exploring turning that into a show as well that would be kind of similar. The problem, I think this is a good problem. The problem is The One Who Got Away is really finding its audience, is growing. Every couple of weeks, a new episode comes out and new listeners join us. New people are inspired. People are calling regularly. And so I'm, at least for the next year, I'm really focused on this. I mean, at this point, there's a book in the works. There's a theater production. Someone's writing a script. We're doing articles as well. There's a lot of other work going on that's coming from The One Who Got Away. So probably that's going to be my focus for a while.
Since you are getting your contributors to just call in, right, and give their submission, what about your listeners? Do they ever, wonder what you would say to The One Who Got Away?
Yeah, the listeners don't ask me that, but people in regular life often ask me, what would I say to The One Who Got Away? I think my whole thing is, I've said this on the show, I don't have a one who got away, really, because I think a core part of the idea of someone who got away from you is that maybe there's something left over or unresolved that you didn't say or that you didn't do. And so I've really learned this through the calls and through listening to the show. I try to kind of live in as much in my integrity as possible and say the things to the people who are around me that I really want to say, and put my heart out there, put my feelings out there, and be vulnerable and share in that way. So it means, that I'm living a more emotional life in some ways, but also I have a lot of peace with the way I move through the world. I wonder, what about you, Wayne? Do you have a one who got away?
So many.
Oh, really?
What I would say to The One Who Got Away, do I have to name names? Not necessarily.
No, you
right?
don't have to name names. It's completely anonymous.
I would definitely, tell this person that, I love her. I treasure her. I'll do anything to reverse that decision. Yeah, that's
wow.
I'm sure that this is pretty standard fare, right? You're getting tons of messages that sound exactly the same as that.
I mean, that's really beautiful. Firstly, thank you for sharing that with me and with your listeners. Yeah, I think, on the one hand, we can look at it and say, so it's standard, so it's not usual. And we can shrug and say, well, that's not interesting enough. On the other hand, that's kind of the point of the show is that, look, Wayne, you're in Singapore, right?
That's right, yeah.
You're in Singapore. And something that you just said is the same as like a woman over in London, which is the same as like a kid over in, I don't know, in LA, is the same as like an old man over in Tokyo. Is that we're all connected, we're all feeling the same thing and going through the same experiences. And in a way, it's really comforting and connecting to know that and to actually show up and feel like, whoa, like I'm not the only one living this way, wishing I'd said, look, I love you and I would do anything to get you back. There's loads of people feeling the same thing and going through the same experiences. It's very human. And the show kind of reminds us that we're just human and normal and it's okay.
So what inspired you to also create music? Because I know that you're multi-talented, you're multifaceted, you're also an artist, yeah? Mm-hmm. And what inspired you to actually create music besides podcasting? Tell us more about your recently released On Beyond New Music and album. I think it's titled, really interestingly, 3 letters, F-I-N, Finn, right? Finished?
Yeah, well, I used to live in Finland, so and I wrote a lot of music during my time in Finland. So It's a play on words. The idea is, I guess, what year was it? In 2019, in December, I decided, this is it. I'm going to stop writing music. I'm done. I'm going to move on. I'm going to focus on something else. And it was Christmas, and I was spending Christmas mainly alone. I wasn't going to visit family or friends for that Christmas. And so I ended up deciding, you know what, I'll release my old music, all the old stuff I wrote when I lived in Finland, everything I did for the last 10 years that no one's heard, I'll release it. And I'll just do a little bit of production work to push it out the door and make it nicer. So I started waking up. I couldn't sleep. I started waking up at 2 a.m. and sitting awake and working every night, just working on the production of this album. And before I knew it, I'd written a whole new album. And I loved it. And I'd written the album for me. Usually I write the album for someone. I'm very romantic and emotional. So I usually write my music for other people. And it was the first time I wrote an album for myself. And it felt really good. And I thought it'd be my last album. So I'd already decided, like, Finn, the end, done. But it felt like a great title anyway. So I released it. And the music from Finn appears in The One Who Got Away. A lot of the music I write, in fact, all of the music in The One Who Got Away, I've composed it. There's going to be an album out probably later this year that is the soundtrack to The One Who Got Away. It's an entire album just of music from the show. But I love that idea of, we can have these. It's one thing to have these messages, and there are a lot of podcasts that we hear and radio shows that we hear that have call-ins or stories and so on, and they have music, but usually the music isn't composed just for that show. So I thought it would be a very special thing to have music written for the show that you can only hear on the show. I think it gives it a special feeling.
Yeah, and you're the second podcaster who's doing his own music, composing his own music, and then playing it on his own podcast show. So this is incredible. And you're inspired.
Who else is doing that? Who's
writing their own? Lindsay Graham. He has a show called Plus, and also American 1865. And he has also a business podcast. So I'm going to send a link to his shows to you later on Instagram. And he was on the show earlier on, I think about 4 hours ago. So yeah, he was talking about how he's composing music as well. And everything, all the music that is on his podcast are done by him. So just like you, super talented. And inspiring me as well, because I don't really, I can't write music. I can only play the drums. But I recently put up a band again after 20 years not playing music. Mm-hmm. And there's a really talented singer and songwriter in my band. I probably asked him to make some music and probably put it in the next episode of my podcast. So that's something
that would be great.
Yeah.
More original music in podcasts would be wonderful.
It's like more personal touch, right? And this DIY enterprise really takes off in a huge way, because if the music is down on the podcaster, I think I really love this idea.
I think it gives it a really special feeling, and like you said, a personal touch and just something different. It kind of elevates it. I think it's the experience that I want people to have with The One Who Got Away is something very dreamy and cinematic and emotional. And when we go see movies, there's a lot of thought put into the scoring, the soundtrack that appears. So I really want to treat them like very small movies.
Since we're on the topic of music in movies, what recent Netflix or maybe any other movies out there caught your attention because of the great soundtrack?
Oh, so many. I think Tenet, the Christopher Nolan movie, was very, very interesting. It has the same composer, I think, who did Black Panther. He's Swedish. I'm Googling his name right now. Yeah, Ludwig Göransson. I think did Tenet as well. And yeah, just excellent soundtrack. The mixing was very controversial and interesting. And then in terms of shows, I mean, one of my all-time favorites is High Maintenance. Have you seen that show?
No, only High Fidelity. Maintenance, no.
Yeah, High Fidelity is a great one. High Maintenance is It's an HBO show. It originally started on Vimeo. It was a Vimeo net series, and HBO picked it up. And it's about a cannabis dealer in New York City who's cycling around and delivering cannabis to people. But it's not really about that. It's about, you get kind of little vignettes, small stories with each family or person or group that he delivers cannabis to. It's actually nothing, really very little to do with the drug itself, and more to do with drama and interpersonal drama. But the soundtrack is stunning, to the point where I actually made a Spotify playlist just inspired by music from the show. I have like 5-6 hours of music when I just want to have that feeling from the show. So high maintenance. And then there's a show called The Young Pope. Have you seen that one?
I think I've seen the first episode, but I couldn't finish. Yeah.
It's very, very intense. It's a Paolo Sorrentino show. And it's got Jude Law as the lead. The cinematography is really stunning, but the music, there's a thing they do with the music where there's a lot of high and low that they play with, where they go from the hyper religious symbology, like shots in the Vatican, to very intimate sexualized scenes that are like very distant to Catholicism. But the music that they play over this is not what you'd expect. So when you see all of these, all of the people moving through the Vatican, these different religious figures, they're playing like really hard techno music. And the feeling that you get from it is really, really fascinating. It's shocking, it's unexpected, it gives you this intensity, because normally you'd expect maybe some classical music or something choral, you know, with lots of voices and reverb and so on. So I love what Sorrentino does with the juxtaposition there. It's intense. It makes the show really, really fun to watch.
Now you really piqued my interest in that film, because when you're describing the scenes where it seems to be a mismatch, but it's actually perfect for that scene, right? It's like expecting maybe a song by Enigma, but you're getting a Daft Punk techno song instead.
Exactly. Or there's a movie about one of my favorite movies called I think it's called The Last Black Man in San Francisco. It's a really beautiful film. The script is stunning, the casting stunning, the cinematography, and there are these scenes. I live in Berkeley/Oakland, and there are these scenes that are filmed over, and I used to live in San Francisco. There are scenes filmed all around the Bay Area. And there are shots where typically you would expect like slow-mo shots of streets of different communities, and you might expect some hip hop to be playing. And yet there's these beautiful orchestral compositions. And I love the way that they're playing with that juxtaposition and challenging your expectations as well. It's something I'm really fascinated by, and I want to explore later. I'm probably the thing I'm going to do when I move on from The One Who Got Away is move into film, and that's something I want to explore.
Have you ever, considered, or is that one of your dreams? I think it's probably the dream of every podcaster to have your film adapted, to have your podcast, turn into a movie and maybe made accessible on Netflix, for example. Is that one of your dreams as well?
Yeah, I would love to. With The One Who Got Away, I'd really love to do that. And I'm talking with, there are a couple of producers in New York who I'm talking with at the moment about a stage production. So we'll bring it to the theater. They're writing a draft of the script at the moment. And then I've spoken on and off with different producers about bringing it to TV. I don't know how we do that. I think it would be wonderful. I'm not too worried. I'm not too worried at the moment because I'm enjoying focusing on the podcast. I love where we're at the moment, so it's fine. But if there was the opportunity, of course, I would jump at that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Since you recommended me so many great movies with great soundtracks, I'm going to recommend one to you as well. It's a Netflix movie called Mank. Not sure whether you come across that. The soundtrack is by this fantastic duo who won the Oscars, right? I think for The Social Network, Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor. The reason why I fell in love with that movie is because of the soundtrack. And there's a Wadsy piece that was played in one of those memorable scenes. Yeah. Suddenly, I can't remember the characters and the actors' names, but
it's got Gary Oldman as the lead. Yeah.
He's one of the,
it looks really, I've not seen Mank yet. It looks really interesting. I think visually interesting. I love black and white cinematography and photography. For instance, my Instagram feed is only black and white, and it has been for years and years. But the soundtrack, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Did you know they also did Soul as well? They did the I believe the orchestral score for Soul, the recent Pixar movie. But they also did I think Gone Girl, the adaptation of the book, and also The Social Network. And the soundtracks to those films are stunning. I absolutely love their composition. And actually, you know, if I'm really open about it, if you listen to the soundtrack to The One Who Got Away, clearly I'm inspired by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
Are you a big Nine Inch Nails fan?
Not at all. No. Too dramatic. It's too I don't know. It's too maybe I should be, but it just feels like too emo and dramatic and out there. And I think as emotional as I am and sensitive and maybe dramatic as I am, I don't think I'm like performatively emo about these things. Even the name, Nine Inch Nails, it just sounds, it's over the top immediately.
That's Trent Reznor, right? He never do a half-ass. He's always the extreme, either the most beautiful or the most depressing or the most, aggressive. And I may have to mention Nine Inch Nails because the drummer who won the Grammy Award with Nine Inch Nails, he recorded the track Wish, right, which won them a Grammy. He was on the festival last night, so 2 nights ago, actually. And he was talking about that, the Grammy win, and of course, how Trent Reznor has evolved, right? And I think that's what podcasters love, because we love to evolve as well. And I like the way that you're seeing action in so many different fields, not just confining yourself, your content creation in podcasting. Do you think that one of your episodes or future episodes, would it be done in other platform? Like, for example, will you be taping your live call-in show next, maybe perhaps on Clubhouse where we met?
So I think that's a really interesting question. I guess the first thing is that I don't really promote this, but every 2 weeks on a Saturday night, or usually on a Saturday night, sometimes on other nights, you can watch The One Who Got Away live on Twitch. The whole show is recorded live and anyone can tune in. And actually, this rarely happens, but there's even a number on the screen and people can call in and talk to me and we can do like a live One Who Got Away. So it's already out there on Twitch, and maybe later this year, next year, me and the producers will make a bigger deal of that and publicize that more. With Clubhouse, there is going to be, it's already on the books, there's going to be a live One Who Got Away event on Clubhouse there's a group called the Memory Circle on Clubhouse. So with that group, we're doing a live One Who Got Away. I'm looking for the date now. Yeah, on March the 4th at 4 p.m. PST. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have a room on Clubhouse. I don't think we'll record it for a podcast. So it'll be a one-time kind of thing. We'll have a room on Clubhouse. We'll be asking the question, what would you say to the one who got away? Anyone can come up and tell their story, but it'll also be kind of a conversation. And I'll be joined by an amazing psychologist, Dr. Julie Fraga, who will be on stage with me, and we'll be having that conversation with people. Julie will be there to provide a therapist perspective. I think it'll be really interesting. Yeah.
Something to look forward to. And I think I'll be one of those who will be jumping into your room and be part of the audience and maybe raise my hand and come up and also ask questions to both of you. So it's definitely something that maybe our audiences in Asia, listeners who are on Clubhouse, they should check that out as well. can I ask you the next question? Why you are grateful for the moments between moments? It's something that I read on your socials, by the way.
You just read that on my Instagram. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think so. That's from a photograph of, I think it's someone sitting on a bed, right? And so I took a photo of a partner who was sitting on a bed naked with their back to me, basically. And I at the time I thought that was a really special moment. Nothing was happening. It was like it was this in-between moment where I even say it in that post. I might get up and go pee, or I might make some coffee, or I might check my phone or something. But these in-between moments, if you skip over them, you lose out on something really simple and mundane and essential in life. I really do think, this ties back to the idea of love and loss and heartbreak, and appreciating who we have, even if it's just ourselves, appreciating who we have and what we have right there in the moment, just paying attention. I think there's also I'm quite open about this. I practice Soto Zen Buddhism, so I try not to push that on anyone too openly, but also I think philosophically it's really fascinating to me, and it's I love this idea of just trying to appreciate the present moment, whatever's coming up, or at least just show up for it, even if it feels awful, just to be there in that moment and feel it, rather than worrying about the past or the future. So I think that's what I'm talking about for those moments in between moments.
Last question before we let you go. What did you miss the most about Manchester, England?
What do I miss? I miss my family. So I'm in case anyone doesn't know, I'm from Manchester, England. I miss my family. I miss maybe one or two friends who are there. I miss the feeling in the summer when it's really hot and you can smell the grass, the freshly cut grass in summer days. And I miss some of the food. The food in Manchester got really, really good in the last few years. Every time I go visit, it's really wonderful. But really, I don't miss too much from Manchester or England. I'm very, coming back to that idea of being in the present moment, I tend to be pretty content and grounded, usually wherever I am in any moment. Although, having said that, I'm about to move to New York City. So there's some discontentment with California, and in about a month, I'm going to be living in New York and starting a new life there.
Wow, in the East Coast.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing East Coast life. I think there's a lot more. I think the art scene there is going to be fascinating. And then the podcasting scene, I know a few professional podcasters out there, and it'll be great to be connected to them as well. So I think it's going to be really fulfilling.
Yeah, and one of the probably more famous podcasters, her name is Juleka. She'll be coming on to this festival later on, and she'll be talking about podcasting biasness in New York. Like why is there an East Coast bias in terms of it is realm that we're in podcasting? So maybe you can come on and maybe ask her some questions as well, because she's based in New York. So yeah, that's another conversation we can get together and maybe get engaged on together in the future. Maybe we can start a room and have the three of you just jam on this topic in the future, because you're moving there.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so great to have you here, and thanks for agreeing to do this, Oliver Blank. So I'm sorry I got your name wrong earlier. This is the right name, B-L-A-N-K. So I'll catch up with you very soon. Take care of yourself over there. Yeah, take care.
Thanks, Wayne. Take care. Cheers. Bye.
Bye. Cheers. Rob, how are you?
Hi, Wayne. I'm really well. How are you today?
I'm great for some reason. Okay, wait. First of all, I think your audio, probably your mic, is it
how are we doing
in terms of your levels, or is it too far away from you? Because it sounds a little bit muffled.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, much better. Maybe closer to your. Yeah, earlier on it was really
I will
muffled. Yeah.
lean in. Sorry.
Oh, this is
I
better.
apologize. Okay.
Now we can hear a sexy voice finally. So yeah, I was saying, I'm pretty good hanging in there because I've been podcasting and doing this live festival since midnight. So I look
I
like
can't believe the effort you've put
worn
through.
out.
It is incredible. It is. I can't believe
Sunrise,
you're you're up right now. It's insane.
It's insane. Like I thought that I should do this because you should optimize, happiness, right? Happiness is when I get to connect with people around the world, especially those who are from my tribe. Podcasters are interesting to me. So it's great that we have you on because we know you're crushing it. You're doing a lot of great things in this realm. So where exactly are you right now? Exactly.
So it's quite funny. I'm from New York, as opposed to your last guest going to New York, but currently I'm in Melbourne, Australia. So it's 11 a.m. here. We're about 3 hours ahead of you in Singapore. So thinking of Friday lunch, that's on the mind. But we have an office here and then one up in Sydney as well. But I currently am in Melbourne.
Awesome. I was in Melbourne, I think exactly a year ago to watch Tool perform at, I think, Kudos Bank Arena. Oh, that's Sydney actually. I watched 2 shows. The other one was in Melbourne. Yeah. So great memories from Melbourne. But unfortunately, with this,
a year ago.
What's that?
Very different a year ago, pre-COVID.
So different. Yeah, everything has changed. And new technology as well. But I think the optimism for podcasting is still sky high. Yeah. Do you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. We've seen massive growth here in Australia, about 56% year-on-year growth, which is just incredible. It's incredible. We've seen our listenership just go up since we've started about a year and a half ago here in Melbourne.
Fantastic. And I know that, when I announced that you'll be coming on the show, we are so excited to welcome you. Sorry.
Thank you. I can't believe I'm so honored and have to thank you. I can't believe I'm on a lineup with Lindsay Graham and then Sharon Taylor will be following me. Quick note,
those are legends,
Taylor,
right?
Absolute legends. Sharon Taylor, we met with her yesterday. She's one of the first people in the industry I met. And everyone knows her as such a gun. She's incredibly knowledgeable. She has accomplished so much, but she's just such a kind person. And at the time, like, no one knew who we were. And she gave us the time of day. And so I'm always very appreciative to have met her. So, I'm just very
coming on really after you.
Yeah. What a change. What a change.
Yeah. And I can also say the same thing for her. She's terribly nice. So I really thank her, so much because our Podcast Asia audio replays are hosted on Omni Studio on her platform. So she's very kind to sponsor that for us. And of course, recently, all the great news that are coming her way, she fully deserved it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. She works so hard. And but pre-COVID was so hard to even get a hold of because she was never in Melbourne. She was just traveling all around all the time.
Yeah. So let's put a spotlight back on you because we know that you're the co-founder and CEO of Ranieri and Co. Yeah, in Australia and New Zealand, your company exclusively represents to the world's largest independent podcast publisher, Wondery. That's why I think the Lindsay Graham connection comes from. And the hits include like Dirty John, Apology Line, Business Wars, Dr. Death, The School of Greatness, and loads more. So I think it's important to repeat this so that our Asian audience are more familiar with what you do. And of course, Ranieri & Co. also makes custom branded podcasts that hit the sweet spot between what brands want to talk about and what audiences are generally interested in. Stories that inspire, inform, and entertain. This introduction for you, actually, I wanted to bring up earlier, but I want to dive into the question. What is your favorite podcast of 2020?
Favorite podcast of 2020? Okay. So technically, this came out in the last weeks of 2019, but I listened to it in 2020. So my answer for this is Business Wars, Hershey vs. Mars. And this is because as a child, my mother was a fabulous baker. So I have an incredible sweet tooth, Wayne. And everyone knows me for that. And so I could kind of crush a handful of M&Ms while listening to this and understand how I got here and how those got in my hand. Similarly, when I was quite young, my aunt took me to Hershey Park, which is in Pennsylvania. And so I knew a certain side of the story. It was kind of like my own little Willy Wonka experience. I went to this incredible chocolate factory, got to see where it was made, and I knew he was this incredible philanthropist. But David Brown gave this whole other side of the story, the whole rivalry between the businesses that I was not aware of. So I really loved it kind of from a personal note. But further to that, David Brown just does a fabulous job. He researches everything so thoroughly. He gives an incredible soundscape to everything. He voices over different characters. I could just listen to him. His voice is like butter, or I guess in this case, like caramel. But I really loved, that was by far my favorite podcast of 2020. Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself because I was taking a drink.
Okay.
And I muted myself. I forgot to unmute myself.
Just had a mini heart attack, Wayne. Thank you.
Sorry about that. And I was saying that, you have many favorites, I'm sure. This is just the cream of the crop. And definitely we don't want to maybe run through the whole list of all the favorite podcasts, because I have a list of 24 favorite podcasts of last year. And I think maybe it's good to ask you, what is the podcast that sums up last year best for you?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you your money's worth, Wayne. I'm going to give you two answers for this. One, I think because the title is just a perfect phrase for last year, and it's "This is actually happening." Because I think right now we all look back and we're like, that actually happened, 2020. And that podcast was all around just incredible, sometimes strange things people have gone through, whether they couldn't sleep for 120 hours or whether they grew up in a cult. But I think an episode for all of us is we lived through a pandemic, right? So I think that really summed up the year. But another one for me was Brene Brown's Unlocking Us. And I think she does an incredible job of being very vulnerable. She takes an introspective look at herself. And I think that was just a very salient viewpoint during 2020, because we were all sort of quarantined, we were stuck with ourselves, and we kind of all were looking inwards. So I think the content for me just really resonated. Although I do have to admit, whenever I tell people I listen to Brene Brown, I feel like I've just admitted I'm a 45-year-old mother of three. Like, I don't think I'm the target audience for that show, or the kind of the demographic that generally listens to it. But I just really loved that content.
Amazing. And I almost forgotten to mute my mic again. So
That's right.
that was something that I think draws me in. I think you mentioned about Brene Brown. These are all the great shows, podcasters that we are so grateful that we are, living in the same era with them, right? And it's great to hear that you are picking these favorites of mine as well as your favorite, and also sum up the year, last year, especially the pandemic year, that's best for you. So how many hours did you actually spend listening to podcasts, and what was your most listened to podcast genre in 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a company, we looked at these figures at the end. So that's the only reason why I know this. This is not off the top of my head. I spent about 70 hours listening to podcasts in 2020, which is not an exorbitant amount, especially when you work in the industry. I realize that. But for us, it was our first full year of business. We had to get the Ranieri & Co. name as well as Wondery to market here in Australia and New Zealand. And on top of that, we would go to agencies, the biggest agencies in the world, and we would have, a room of 20 people, and we would ask who's bought in podcasting before, and we would see a single raised hand. And so then we realized, well, now our work is twofold, because we actually have to educate an industry on this medium and advertising in it. So we had a lot of work cut out. We then created a masterclass after that, and we're educating people besides just telling them about ourselves. So I did not necessarily listen to as much content as I would have loved to have. I can admit that. But I would say the genre that really got me through, Wayne, would be that sort of personal growth space. Because starting a new business and then going through a worldwide pandemic, seeing your pipeline dry up, you sort of need some inspiration. You need something to kind of keep your eye on the goal. Here's some other inspiring stories to get you through. And so, Brene Brown certainly fits within that. But then there's the Good Life Project, which is quite an incredible podcast as well with Jonathan Fields. But that inspirational content absolutely was my number one genre.
What is your hot tip for a podcast about to make it big this year in 2021? And maybe give us a couple more podcasts that we should get obsessed with absolutely, in 2021.
Yeah, okay. I'll do a bit of a shameless plug. Our website, ranierico.com, we have a section called News and Insights, and you can get a whole lot more of these tips. I'll give one tip that is in an article all around successful content, and then I'll give one that's kind of my personal right now that has not been shared. The first it's seemingly obvious, and that is pick a topic that you're really passionate about. And of course, it's like, oh, yeah, that's not really a tip. But the reason why I wanted to talk about that one, Wayne, is because all the time, we know when we hear great stories, something different is happening. We're leaning into those stories. And we now know, because Harvard Business Review did the research, when we hear those stories, dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin are released in the brain. Those will make your content more likely to be memorable. It's more likely for the listener to trust what they're hearing, more likely to bond. A great example would be Serial. When everyone was listening to that story, they bonded with a side. Did Adnan commit this crime or not? And so they wanted to see that through. Now, if you're approaching your content like it's research for a university assignment, that chain reaction won't occur. You won't tell the great story. And I don't think you have as good of a shot at having a successful podcast. Now, the reason why I say, even though this is obvious advice, I really want to give it, is because right now, as podcasting matures, people are being quite clever. They're looking for content gaps. What's something they can fill that hasn't been spoken about? And though that's clever, if you're not also passionate about it, that's not necessarily the right approach. So I really wanted to bring that front and center. Make sure you're passionate about it, because then you can tell that story in a really effective way. Now, my other hot tip is because I come from a programmatic background. So that's where this is coming from. And if you've ever run a programmatic campaign, you have different audiences that you're targeting and using different creative. And as the campaign goes on, you realize, wait a minute, this audience is performing better, so let's shift budget towards them. This creative is not working as well, so maybe let's remove that. And if a content creator can sort of remove themselves from their content and look at it objectively like that, yes, you're really passionate about the topic, but maybe there was an angle that resonated with your listeners. Explore that further, right? You're optimizing what's working. Similarly, you might realize there's a target demographic listening that you didn't expect at all. And these are not hypothetical. So Wondery does tons of true crime content. No one expected that to skew so heavily female, right? So we have certain shows in true crime where 90% of the audience is female. Now, it's not because all women want to kill their husbands and commit crimes. Spotify did the research and found actually they're really interested in the psychology behind these decisions. So all of a sudden you have this content and you're like, we gotta, get it in front of a different set of ears. And so if you can pull back and sort of objectively view your content and optimize as you go along, I think you have a much better shot at having a successful podcast. Now, the second part of your question, the 3 podcasts to get obsessed with. Okay. The first is Against the Odds. So that's a Wondery piece that's coming out. I'm really excited about this one. So it's all around these scenarios where people are just put up against all odds. So the very first episodes will be around the Thai soccer team that were stuck in the caves and what that rescue mission looked like. There'll be other episodes around a woman who's actually held captive by Somali pirates. And the reason why this interests me as a podcast is because Wondery really makes it their job to put the listener in the middle of the story. So though I never want to be captured by Somali pirates, I absolutely want to be in the middle of that story and kind of go through that experience. I think we all have that curiosity, but we can do it from a safe distance. A second one, this is coming out of Spotify. It's called Your Magic. And so the host, Michelle T, is an author. She's the creator of Drag Queen Storytime, and she's a tarot reader. And the whole idea is to bring a little bit of magic into your life. So she'll start each episode with a tarot reading. She'll have celebrities on that she'll interview. She'll talk about incorporating magic into your life. There's even some fun stuff like, what does an emoji spell look like? Now, I don't believe in astrology. I just think this is really fun content. Like, it's stuff I love to learn about. And so I'm quite interested in hearing what that's going to sound like. And then the last podcast, my third, would be one out of Vox that's coming called, it's either Unexplained or Unexplainable. Unexplainable. And that podcast is all around what scientists can't explain. And they want to do it because as humans, we talk about what we can explain, right? Like, I'm here talking to you because I can explain certain things. It's not because you want to put me on the spot and ask me about, some sort of science I don't understand. And so it's quite natural for us to do that as humans. But the reason why I love this as a podcast is when you only have audio, your imagination really goes to work. You have this theater of the mind. It fills in the visuals of what you're listening to. And so I think it could be a really fun trip to do that when it's these unexplained things. We used to think space was the final frontier, but we don't even know all about the human brain. We don't know what's at the deepest parts of the ocean, unless you're watching like a Jason Statham movie where it's massive sharks. But in reality, we don't know. And so I just love the idea of exploring these things and really letting the imagination play out with that.
Amazing recommendations. I'm going to check out all three, because the way you are pitching it, I think you did a brilliant job getting us.
They're not even all Wondery, so there's no bias.
You mentioned about true crime, and I'm going to throw you a curveball because one of the Apple Business podcaster, he's a #1 chart topper, by the way. His name is Christopher Lockhead. Yeah, I follow him on LinkedIn, and sometimes I love his posts, sometimes maybe not so, because he's, he could be very right, sometimes he could be very wrong too. Yeah, so I want to maybe get your hot take, whether you think he's right or wrong on this. This is what he wrote on LinkedIn 2 hours ago. He says, I used to love true crime content, and I will never consume it again. You see, in 2019, one of my best friends was murdered. In 3 a.m. home invasion robbery, people who consume true crime often do not realize, I didn't, that they are supporting the ongoing terrorizing of victims and their families. How did that ever become entertainment? As a podcaster, it angers me knowing that true crime is one of the top categories in podcasting. These podcasters are monetizing killing, pain, and suffering. So I write today on LinkedIn to ask you, please consider what you choose to subscribe to. It matters. Right or wrong?
That is wrong. I thoroughly disagree with that. A great example was the podcast Bad Batch. And so Bad Batch was all around the stem cell industry in the United States, and kind of these like snake oil salesman types who were selling things and making these promises of healing that just were not true. And they weren't selling valid product. Bad Batch as a series gave voice to the victims that then had a greater platform. And those victims actually spoke at the end of the series. Serial gave Adnan, who had a massive mistrial of justice, another chance in court. Dr. Death shed light on malpractice with that terrifying doctor in Texas who had maimed or killed, I think, 30 something patients. And it brought light to that. And so I thoroughly disagree. I think it can be a platform to give people who don't necessarily have a voice and were victims that platform. Yes, it can be monetized, but anything can be monetized. And I think that's sort of clumping two things that are in the same environment together and giving them this sort of cause and effect that's not necessarily a link. Those are my thoughts.
100%. I think I agree with you, and I think that he's wrong with this post. I guess this is how he likes to create conversations or discussions around the things that he posts online as well. And he, as someone who is also in the podcasting industry, who's crushing it on the Apple charts. By the way, sometimes people take notice of what he posts and then they talk about it. So I'm one of his fans. So I just want to bring it up because when you mentioned true crime, I was like, oh, maybe we should talk about this one.
Thanks, Wayne. You've made my first enemy in the industry.
Anyway, I love that genre, true crime. I mean, who doesn't like a good story? Yeah, I mean, Absolutely. It did happen. It happened, and nobody's encouraging anything with this intent of doing storytelling. In fact, it highlights one of the things that life is all about, the ups and downs, right? The good and the bad. So you have to find balance. I just think that targeting podcasts, genres or category, and going after that probably is the wrong thing to do. And so I'm with you on that. And I think that let's not dwell on this. Let's move on and maybe talk about, those phenomenal podcasts that you're loving, right? How about this week? Because every week there's always a new thing, new app, new content, new show. Which phenomenal podcast are you loving this week?
This actually flows from your last question quite nicely. I'm loving the apology line. And to say all true crime is alike is not true, because the apology line technically is sort of true crime, but it's really all about this art project in the 1980s, where a man put up posters all around New York City saying, hey, I'm not with the police, I'm not with the feds, call in and you can admit or apologize to whatever you feel like, apologizing for. And it became this massive project. But then some of the callers who were calling in were not such wonderful figures. And someone had admitted or claimed to be a serial killer. And so what kind of really strikes me is it's a very unique piece of content. Not normally do you get true crime that starts from an art project. And so I find that really fascinating. And back to that podcaster's point, true crime is not all the same. But I love this podcast. This is why I'm obsessed with it this week, because every little detail is just paid attention to. So they have the original clips from the apology line. You can listen to those recordings. Furthermore, the host is actually the artist's wife. And so you get this different angle of someone who watched her husband get pulled back from society because he kind of became this hermit, fully engrossed in this project. And it's only she can give that angle. Only she saw it and experienced it. And so I'm fully engrossed in that piece of content. That is like my guilty pleasure almost, except I don't feel guilty.
Sounds phenomenal to me. How about favorite podcast advertisements of 2020?
Okay. My favorite podcast ad would be, it was for the Comey Rule. So the Comey Rule was a series that the streaming service Stan, which is like a Netflix here in Australia. Comey Rule was a series they put out, and it was all around James Comey and Donald Trump. Very political. That had an ad in Bunga Bunga, which was a podcast all around Italy's ex-prime minister, Silvio Berlusconi. So at the first level, there's this beautiful contextual alignment because Silvio Berlusconi's story is quite reflected in Donald Trump's kind of rise to the presidency. And they're both political, but not your typical politicians. So there's this beautiful contextual alignment. Also, Whitney Cummings, who is the host of Bunga Bunga, she's a very successful stand-up comedian. She's also created the show Two Broke Girls. She's very funny, and she delivered everything very snarkily throughout her podcast. Now, in the ad, she was able to inject some of that very subtly. Was there collusion? We don't know. Were the Russians involved in the American election? We don't know. And so there was this beautiful kind of humor to it, very subtly injected. And she also loved one of her favorite actors, Jeff Daniels, who's in The Comey Rule. So the end result was you had someone talking about a series that you'll probably love because you're already listening to something that's very similar. And it's like tuning into your funny, famous best friend who's giving an authentic recommendation for some content that you'll probably enjoy. So that was by far my favorite. I think just the delivery by the host, the contextual alignment, it all just fit and lined up beautifully.
Since we're on the topic of ads, right? We definitely have to ask you this as a last question before we let you go. What is the science behind the power of a podcast ad?
Okay. Again, because we're tight on time, on the website, we talk about this in depth because there's a whole study behind this. So I love this question, Wayne, because we know that there is that whole neurological response when we hear great stories. I talked about that earlier, the dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin released in the brain. As advertisers, it comes then quite naturally to ask, well, what about the ad though? Like that's the content. Well, is the ad effective in that environment? And so Mindshare's Neurolab ran this study with Wondery. And what they did was they hooked up participants to electrograde medical equipment, and they measured electric brain activity as participants consumed both a social video ad and a podcast ad. Now, what they looked at were things like memory activation, which is considered the first, number one neurometric in measuring consumer decisions. They looked at emotional intensity levels. They looked at the valence of those. So was it positive or negative? And then they looked at the association of keywords both before and after people had consumed these ads. So these are all very fancy ways of saying, did people remember it? Did they then trust it? That's kind of that positive or negative association. How did they feel? And the answer on all of these was a very emphatic yes, they do trust them. They do remember. And so with the podcast ad, there was 38% higher emotional intensity with the ad than the social video ad. 38% higher memory encoding, 27% higher emotional intensity. Now, for everyone sitting out there, if you're wondering, what does that mean? Why do I care? The relevance of that is those two things are highly associated with trust and attention, which as marketers is what we're always going after. Those are like the golden two things. So yes, there was very much this sense that the podcast ad was more effective from a neuroscience standpoint. And I guess the last thing I'd say, because I know my time is up, is that makes intuitive sense, right? We know that if you're coming back to someone on a normal frequency to listen to their content, you've built trust with them. To hear a message from them, you're going to be a lot more open and receptive to that than a random video that pops up and follows you around the internet because of cookies. So it makes a lot more intuitive sense that the ad would be more effective.
This is a fantastic take. I think you broke it down for us so sickly clear, and I'm so appreciative that you brought your A game to this festival and shared with us your favorites, shared with us your hot tips, shared with us, some of your favorite ads, and of course the science behind the power of a podcast ad. So I'm so excited that if we can actually re-invite you back on this festival again sometime in the near future, because
Thank you
we're
so
doing
much.
this monthly.
I really enjoyed it.
Next time, Yeah, it will be great to have you back on, and maybe tell us what you're up to, especially still based in Melbourne, Australia, right? So tell us the situation there, the podcasting industry, and give us your insights and some of your current favorites as well. It will be always very interesting to have you check back, onto this festival, and we can check back with you what are the phenomenal podcasts you've been listening to for that week. So we can't wait to have you back again.
Thank you so much, Wayne. It was great to meet you.
Great meeting you. So have a great day. I'll see you in our next edition. Yeah. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks. Hi, Sharon. How are you? Can you hear me, Sharon?
I'm muted. Sorry, I just tried to find the unmute button. I'm great now that I'm unmuted. How are you?
I'm great. I'm a little bit worn out because I've been doing this for 2 nights already. And just a 2-3 hour nap in between, when I'm able to take a break. But I'm still pushing on because you guys are bringing your A game to this festival. So you're driving me, and you got a fuel for me to keep doing this. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
That's okay. That's all right. That's commitment. I can't believe you've been going for so long. That's wow. Lots of coffee.
Oh, I actually need coffee right now. It's like I've been, live streaming since post midnight. Right now, it's like the sun is right in front of me, and I'm like looking at the glare and everything. I need coffee. That's a signal for coffee, actually.
Yeah. I'm a 5-cup a day girl. Yeah.
You look very different from the last time when I saw you. I think we missed you during our last month's Podfest Asia. We missed your presence, but of course you were, you were there during our debut, and we made our first virtual event. That was way back in December, right? So it's great to have you back on our 3rd virtual event, and congratulations, because exciting times ahead for Triton Digital and Omni Studio as you guys join the iHeartMedia family. So how excited are you with this piece of news?
Yeah, it's really exciting. Like, obviously the deal hasn't closed yet, and so everyone is really excited to be able to kind of like get in the room with them and figure out how we can use those benefits for our clients and things. But yeah, it was a big announcement last week, and everyone's been really supportive of it. Everyone on the team is excited and looking forward to what that means. So yeah, it'll be an interesting next chapter for all of us.
And I remember when I heard the news, right? Evo Terra was breaking the news on his daily LinkedIn live stream podcast pontification.
You can always trust Evo, yeah.
The irony is I found out from a podcast, so I think it's quite appropriate, for him to actually announce this breaking news. Although his podcast is really a breaking news podcast, but he does bring good news, on his show these days. So it's great that all this information, all these news of acquisitions are like just coming, fast and quick, especially since 2021. I think even more years before that. So do you think that this trend will continue?
As a business?
In terms of like, great news, positive news, optimism in podcasting, and of course, Yeah. Like day to day, nothing changes at Triton and Omni. Like we'll still be focusing on building out the best tech for world-class clients all around the globe. Day to day, same. But hopefully just, different owners. Right? Correct. Yeah. And what that brings for people, I guess we'll find out. But yeah, it's very exciting. There is an article that maybe I want to bring to your attention. I think this was probably published a few days after that piece of news broke about the acquisition and, Triton joining the iHeartMedia family. That I think the headline was pretty, I would say, impactful, because that headline was "The podcast wars will come down to ad tech, not exclusive content." What is your take on this?
I think there's merit in it, but I think that the podcast wars, like quote unquote, are about lots more than just the tech. I mean, like obviously that's what we live and breathe, and so I feel really strongly about it. But it's about content. It's about strategy. It's about format. It's about so much more. But yeah, look, I mean, there are definitely opportunities in ad tech that only happen if you can unlock scale. And I think that's what that article, I think it was a Verge article. And then Brian Kaminsky also did an interview in Ad Exchanger where he talked more about programmatic and monetization. That's a really good read if anyone's interested in it. So I definitely think that there is merit in it. I don't think it's only going to come down to podcast tech. I'd love it if it did, because it'd be great for me, but I think there's a few more elements to it.
Exactly, and I love that, article like that. Normally, those are very broad paintbrush, right? And they are right and they are wrong at the same time. Definitely, you need a few more things to be aligned to really see, this become fruition. And of course, we know that the Omi Studio and Triton has now become the home for the All Things Comedy Podcast Network. So is that something that maybe you can elaborate on and tell us to all the Asian audience over here in this part of the world?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, for anyone that doesn't know, the All Things Comedy Network, they are a comedy network about all things comedy. So they host like Bill Burr and The Dollop and those types of shows. They've got incredible reach throughout the US. And so like all of the rest of our clients, we've got thousands of clients. They picked us because we have an approach to audio and a team that they liked and a level of support that they needed. And yeah, we're really over the moon to have them come on board. Like, it's been a good start to the year. We've had them, we've had Cast Media, we've had Jim Patterson Group. So 2021 has started out at a breakneck pace for us, which is great.
Fantastic. I know that you've been, not just optimizing Chill, but you've been participating in Clubhouse as well. I've seen you in a couple of rooms recently. I think one of the most recent one was the one that Juleka was moderating. I think Brian Baletta, our good friend, was also on stage sharing, great insights about AdTech. And of course, probably this is a good way to lead to the next question about Clubhouse, because lots have been going on, especially with Robinhood and even Reddit, right? What stood out was that Huffman, I think he went on Clubhouse to speak about that saga. And then Elon Musk, of course, basically generated so much buzz around Clubhouse as well. And as a result of that, we see more and more podcasting or live podcasting being done on Clubhouse at this moment. Do you find this trend interesting enough, for like even some of the technology, should I say, the technology that has been developed in this, in the startup world, for example, to actually complement what Clubhouse is currently lacking in terms of it doesn't have the ecosystem where there's ad tech, there isn't great analytics, there isn't even a payment button, a Patreon-like button to allow advertisers and to allow content creators to actually monetize their shows, right? So I think that you will see an influx of all these startups appearing that actually complements what social audio can bring to the world of live podcasting.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's fascinating to me that they've basically, what are they now, $1 billion valuation, and it's really talk radio, right? Like it'll never fails to amaze me, all the startups that come up that just want to reinvent what radio was back in the day and still is today. Like that's what talkback is. I think social audio is really interesting. It's different to podcasting. Clubhouse to me is all the things about talk radio, conferences, phone calls, Zoom meetings, all kind of mashed together. And I don't think we've yet got enough of a user base in there. Like I think there's like 8 million people using it or something. It's very, very small at the moment, all invite only. And it'll be like Twitter, like what it starts out at in this stage of its journey as a platform is going to be different, because now it's in the hands of the masses and it basically is up to them what they want to turn it into. I think it's probably a little bit too early to think about how it would get monetized. Like how would you do that? Like, would you get a room sponsored by someone? That seems to make the most sense. But how would you dynamic ad insertion in podcast, like in a chat? Would you, while you were talking to me, before you ask a question, say, let's just hear a word from our sponsor before we get into the next segment, and then an ad plays? And would people leave the room because that's happening? Like I think Clubhouse needs more time to step into social audio before it figures out ways to monetize. But they've definitely got plans for it. Like you don't raise that much money and not have a plan on how to make it back. Well, maybe, you never know.
Yeah, and social audio seems to be the buzzword for now. And we are looking at maybe like even the Chinese clones are appearing already, and Mark Cuban's Fireside as well, right? With its rumored AI features that allows seamless matching of podcasters with guests. It's like reducing the heavy lifting that's required, especially like I sometimes go to Clubhouse to look for guests to come on the festival, for example. Yeah. And that can be quite strenuous because you got to click on everyone's picture profile and look at the bio to see whether they are the exact fit for this festival, for example. But if Mark Cuban's Fireside is able to do that and allow us to just go into maybe with a click of a button, immediately matches with like potential guests for a festival like this, that seems to be also like a interesting, feature built in the future. Do you think that will be another exciting area where startups can really, jump into this social audio action?
Yeah, look, I think that anything audio related is good for all of us. Podcasting is a small segment of spoken word audio, and we are all competing for ears and attention. And so Fireside, I mean, there's already a Fireside hosting platform, like Dan Benjamin has had that platform for a number of years, but yeah, Mark Cuban's Fireside, Clubhouse, like these are tackling different problems and appealing to different things in the industry. So I think there's room enough for everyone, and I think it'll be really interesting as to what everyone uses them for. Tom Webster from Edison Research did his newsletter the other day, and he said that Clubhouse is a good way to like cut your chops on podcasting, right? Like it's a very low stakes environment for you to practice interviewing people before you actually go out and publish your podcast. Or it could be used to, market your podcast or grow awareness. Like you don't have to have one or the other. Like you can tackle and like touch lots of different mediums while you're a podcaster, and it doesn't have to detract. It can be very additive, I think. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but yeah, there's going to be more and more and more of them. And Twitter is building audio spaces, and Facebook is going to do something around audio, and it's great for the medium, and people will choose what they want to listen to and what they want to engage with.
One of the keynote speakers at the festival, he's a Grammy Award winner. He plays drums for 9 Inch Nails. He was saying that he's not on Clubhouse because he's waiting for Facebook to clone it and to make it even easier for him to gain followers in it, or maybe to deliver a message, because all his fan base are already established in Facebook. So by the time they actually add this button to do social audio, it seems to be a natural transition, and he doesn't have to do heavy lifting. That's according to his own take.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Or maybe Facebook will just buy Clubhouse and it'll be the quickest startup and acquisition that we've seen for a while. But I mean, it's clear that audio is here to stay, and it's clear that people want to engage with audio, and that's great. And so whatever that means for all the platforms that want to get involved, I think is going to be really interesting to watch.
And talking about new features, right? We are always very excited with new features that you add, especially for Omni Studio. And your team has been hard at work, committing to releasing new features while supporting and onboarding new clients, right? Especially from Asia.
Yeah, so obviously, for those that don't know, like we've got dedicated staff all around the world. So we've got a team of people in, like we've got Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Sydney, who looks after APAC. And so we always kind of try and build for things that make sense globally for all the clients. But yeah, there's definitely, as people, in Southeast Asia start podcasting more and more, hopefully the Omni Studio tool set is something that'll help them get off the ground.
Ever since I started this festival, I'm meeting 5 new podcasters a day, and it's a little relaxing. But I think that the word is out, and everyone seems to think that it's mainstream. There's money to be made. I think obviously if it's driven by money, normally they won't be so successful because they need to have a passion for it, right, before they start podcasting. But I've been getting hit up on LinkedIn a lot because there are new podcasters who are entering the space, and I think with Clubhouse as well, like what you just mentioned, people are testing signal. They're testing whether they like it, as in terms of doing podcasting either as a side gig or they want to do full time. Clubhouse is like a way for them to exercise and see action, and it doesn't be a binary thing where either podcasting is dead and then Clubhouse can rise. Both can actually be a perfect marriage, and they can go hand in hand.
Yeah, I agree.
So we want to ask you about DAI. I think that's your favorite topic, and that's something that you can educate some of our podcasters, especially those who are so well versed in it. Tell us, what is the most often asked question about DAI that you find that you have to repeat over and over again, but sometimes because you've been asked the same question, right? You have a brilliant way of just answering with the most succinctly clear way what it's all about. How will you describe it to someone who doesn't know what DAI is, even at this day and age?
I got asked it the other week, actually, at another conference that I was doing. So, dynamic ad insertion is the ability for you to target ads and upload an ad read separately than if you were going to read it as part of when you were recording the podcast and doing what's called baking in to the file. And so you still do the same ad read, you still, have the same script, and instead what dynamic ad insertion allows you to do is upload that file separately, and you can have that file inserted dynamically into your podcast at time of download based on a number of parameters. And maybe you have no parameters. Maybe you just want every time someone pushes play or downloads the podcast for that ad to be inserted. And that is as simple as it could be. Or maybe you want a different version of the ad for people in Australia versus people in the US. Maybe you only want to target people in Melbourne because you've taken a local sponsorship, like for me, for instance. And dynamic ad insertion allows you to do that and then get more insights than just like a download number in your reports. So you can actually see, like an ad impression and those types of things. So it's good. Everyone thinks that dynamic ad insertion means like pre-recorded radio ads, or that, you can't make it sound as good is such a boring word, but you can't do the same kind of things with it. But you'd be surprised at how many podcasts you listen to that are dynamically inserting their ads, and it sounds like it's part of the normal, show flow. So there's some cool stuff that you can do with it. And I think that we're still scratching the surface of it. Like, you could do dynamic content insertion as well, not just ad insertion. Like, imagine if you were going to, once the world reopens and you wanted to do a tour of the Podfest Asia, you could upload different creative promoting the fact that you were going to be live in different cities, and each of those different cities could hear the fact that you were going to be there on a certain date because it's targeted to them in their location. Like, you can do cool things with it that is not just about ad reads. So if you're not using dynamic ad insertion, get on it. It's great.
And I'm gonna chop and slice this 5-minute segment, right, that you just answered, perfectly for us, because I'm gonna chop and slice it, reshare it, repurpose it. Whenever I get asked this question from 5 new podcasters I meet per day, I'll just send them this because you have just explained it for us, and it will make explaining this technology easier for people, and it's more snackable. I think podcasters, they need to be educated, especially in this field, and to know the possibility as well for them to attract all these advertisements, right? So dynamic ad insertion is definitely here to stay, and it's gonna be a game changer for those who are doing podcasts. So I'm gonna maybe before I let you go, right? We only have 10 minutes left. This is always like too little time. Many questions that we put for you. I always wanted to ask you, how you actually started Omni Studio. I think it's a question that I failed to actually ask you about during your first appearance on Podfest Asia. When did you actually started this Omni Studio? Was it your idea to do this, or was it somebody else's idea, suggestion, or was it because a client requested for it?
Okay, a bit of everything. So Omni Studio, as it is today, is different to what the company was when it was founded in 2011. And it was founded by 3 very brilliant guys in Australia who wanted to build an audio startup. And so initially, Omni Studio, or the company as it is today, was it was called SoundGecko, and it was a text-to-speech platform. So it read articles off the internet to you and converted them to RSS feed. And then Long Jung, who's still our head of product for Omni Studio and kind of podcasting for Triton Digital, was one of those founders. And he wanted to build something called personalized radio, which we're starting to see now with things like pods, or, what Apple does with Scout FM will be interesting. Listener app here in Australia, like Spotify, mixing spoken word and music. Everyone's trying to do it now. But we had this product called Omni Radio, and it basically married spoken word content and music, used the SoundGecko tech to read out like news headlines and weather and things. And it was designed to be your personalized audio experience. So if you had a 23-minute commute and you told the algorithm and the app what you liked, you'd get a little bit of everything to kind of start your day. And then Omni Studio, the product, the hosting product, came out of a need to get more short form content into that app. And so we took it to Southern Cross Austereo here in Australia and said, we would love to get your talk breaks into this consumer app because they're local, they're funny, they're timely, they're perfectly sized. And they didn't have a way to get anything to us. And so Omni Studio, the platform that we know now today, was built out of that idea. And then I come on board in 2016 when there still was Omni Studio and Omni Radio, and then kind of took the company from where it was there to all the way up to the acquisition of Triton Digital back in June of 2019. So yeah, that's a very long-winded story, but yeah, always in audio, 3 founders, not me. I came in late stage to become the CEO and took it up and grew it to be acquired.
Thank God I've changed the banner, because earlier on I put the founder of Omni Studio.
Yeah. I thought, no.
Ask this clarifying question. Yeah, so it's great that you said it right, straight for us. And I'm so grateful that you retold this story. And it's always interesting to know the beginning, right? And all this great success that you guys are getting is so super well deserved. I've been using your platform. I love your platform. I think every podcaster that I talk to these days, they always ask, should I use Anchor? I say, no. Once you're on Omni, you don't want to go back to Anchor.
Thank you.
Tell them that, the reason why there's a banner upstairs, to hear replays on Omni Studio is because this is the best platform and they need to be on it in order to get the best analytics, the world-class analytics. I think that's something that people really need to consider more, especially, so many podcasters have been joining this festival and saying that they discover how to make better content after diving into the analytics and finding out about the demographics. So it's important to have those data that is, not just a summary, but really granular data that allows them to really have great insights into what their listeners like. And I think these are the things that we need to also reproduce as reports for our sponsors or maybe for our potential brand advertisers, right? So
Correct.
We're super excited about your new features. Anything that you'll be giving us a sneak peek into what you'll be releasing this year? Anything that you're allowed to say or not allowed to say?
Yeah, I'm allowed to say stuff. I make my own rules. Don't tell my boss. Last year we launched a product called Secure Distribution, which allows you to have paid subscriptions to your podcast or the infrastructure for them. We're going to have a lot of updates to that this year. Reporting is getting a little bit of an overhaul that hopefully releases soon. So you'll get a bit of a sneak peek of that to be able to see at a glance kind of content insights, and we're calling it the content report. There's a lot of stuff planned. So I don't know. You'll have to look. We release it all on our blog, so everyone should check it out. And if there's anything that anyone wants, or if feature ideas, obviously we're always open to it. We've got Mark on the team who fields that and sends it into the product team. So yeah, keep ideas coming from everyone, please.
How about your Singapore team? Are there anyone who's working from home or the office in Singapore that maybe you can connect us with? And maybe we can even do an in-person event, workshop, right, for maybe new users of your platform. For podcasters, I'm trying to maybe organize an in-person event or workshop so they can get familiarized, with your different features as well. Is there anyone in Singapore I can contact?
Not for that purpose in Singapore. We have account management and then monetization that sits out there. But we're only 3 hours behind. I'm sure that we could find something to get you some content ahead. Time zones. My gosh, confusing.
Me too. There's so many mismatched time zones, as in sometimes I need to convert it, right? And missed a few speakers because they also converted it wrongly. So we miss each other. So we have to do research and all that. So it's always a time zone problem when we're doing maybe this sort of a festival where we have speakers not just in Asia but around the world. So I'm trying to figure it out as well. Calendly is useful though. It's a great tool to actually overcome this sort of situation. So thank you once again. Before you go, any last message for podcasters in Asia?
I think that Asia is accelerating quickly in terms of the professionalism of the space, but there is a huge opening for individual content still. Like, I mean, we've got some big enterprise players there, but if you're thinking about starting a podcast, I would say don't wait much longer. Like, jump in, give it a try, figure out what you want to talk about as opposed to just like talking about everything. Like, find something you're passionate about, look at the top charts in your region, see where there's a gap, like see what you could bring to people that does not exist yet. And then you'll have some pretty good success, I think.
Fantastic. The riches are in the niches, and also dream big, but start small. Most importantly, just start. Yeah.
Just start. Yes. Yep.
Fantastic. This is a great way to close the session. Thank you so much, Sharon, for agreeing to do this again. And we hope that you'll be able to come back not too long away time. Next time, we won't be taking like months before we see you once again. So we're looking forward to your reappearance. And so please take care of yourself over there in Melbourne. And we hope to see you really, really soon.
Thank you. You too. Okay. See you soon. Bye.
Bye, Sharon. Goodbye. Sharon Taylor, MD of Omni Studio. So shout out to her and also her team for creating a great tech. They're not just a hosting provider, they provide great analytics. So one of the selling point that I always inform podcasters who are thinking of Anchor or something else, I will always say Omni Studio. So I have with me Pedro. How are you?
Hey, how are you doing, Wayne?
You sound all right, as in the sweet sound quality coming off my headphones. I think your setup is pretty incredible. Tell us, what is your setup?
I am going through the Rodecaster Pro right now, and I have a pod mic just like you do.
So it's the same setup, but you sound better than mine. Maybe something has to do with my levels, and probably you can shed light on that. Like, what kind of levels should we record? Am I like setting it too high or too low, or is there like phantom power feature that I didn't set on yet or turn on yet? Hi, Roman. How are you, my friend?
Good. How are you?
Great. And you sound even better. It's great that you guys are the industry pros, and you're leveling up in terms of like bringing the audio quality, the game, really helping to inspire us in Asia on how to do podcasting, right? Because of your setup, I think, and the equipment that you use is like different level.
Yeah, no, I mean, it takes a little bit to get to this. And again, it's not something that you have to go, what's going on, Tanner?
Finally, the four of us have been dreaming of this ever since I was hanging out in your clubhouse room, and the four of us in one space. So how awesome is that?
Very, very cool. Happy to be here. Thanks for having us, Wayne.
And thanks for your cool clubhouse rooms. I think that's how we met. But I do not know the backstory behind how you guys met, three of you, yeah? So I'm like trying to point the right square below. Oh, yeah, right here, yeah. So how did you guys meet in the first place? And how did you guys start real talk podcasting together?
I think we first met on Clubhouse, same as we met you. We did not know each other prior to that. And I think the first of us who met were me and Roman, and we disagree with each other. And we're both the kind of characters that when people disagree with us, we kind of have a mutual respect for that. And so that kind of drew us together. And then Pedro joined the fray somehow because he's got that great Texas voice and knows so much about broadcasting and what he does at Safety FM. It was just a natural fit. It was perfect storm, I guess. I don't know. It was. It's not the way that I've ever made friends before, but these guys are great, and I'm so glad to have met them.
No, yeah.
Fantastic. How about your story, Pedro, and Roman as well?
No, again, I just started a room on Clubhouse and in the podcasting space, because that's something that we all enjoy. And, they both came into the room and we had some good ideas and we bounced and meshed off of each other very well. So, and the rest is history. The stars aligned and we ended up, coming together more frequently.
Yeah.
And Roman?
I signed up, I guess, January 5th. I actually switched from Android to Apple just to get on the app because I saw the value in, audio versus audio play in terms of supplementing a podcaster. And then like Tanner said, I disagreed with Tanner about something, and then we started kind of following each other, and then we actually like met and then started just creating rooms together and co-moderating because the chemistry was good, and we were just looking to add value and help people in terms of some of the stuff we've experienced in the podcast space, and just added value, you know, built a community in 6 weeks, and, you know, carried that over and started a show.
This is fantastic, and it's great to assemble, you know, this lineup for this panel, because I have prepared maybe 5 questions or 5 topics to jam on. These are actually the same topics that you guys have been talking about, I think, in the last 2-3 weeks in your rooms. And I eavesdrop your room, you know, whenever I'm either at the gym or I'm like washing dishes, for example. You guys are providing me great knowledge and great resource too. I love to go to your room and you know, just absorb. So I thought that you guys would be perfect to be on this panel and maybe share your answers to the following topics. I want to maybe start with Pedro, right? What is your take in terms of you know, in terms of the right levels that we should record our shows on? Because right now I'm hearing different sound levels. Like, for example, I think I'm louder, maybe louder than Pedro. Roman is louder than me. Tanner is just about right. So starting with Pedro, what is your take on that?
Definitely you want to turn up the volume on your headset so you can hear yourself louder, and record a little bit lower, so that way, 1, you don't clip, 2, you are able to do a lot more in post. And my friend Tanner here, my compadre, ended up showing me some stuff on the Rodecaster Pro of taking all the presets off of the Rodecaster Pro, so that way you have a raw audio file to be able to add those afterwards, to be able to get the fuller voice, the, you know, the oral exciter and the big bottom, the deeper voice that you can, you know, put in on the post production. So on the Rodecaster Pro, you know, you're able to set your gain so that way your fader doesn't have to be all the way up. Usually about the 35 to 38 range. If you have phantom power, it might jump up to maybe about 40, 42. And that way it stays within that sweet spot. It doesn't go into red, and then you're able to get some good quality audio.
Tanner, anything to add?
Yeah, fundamentally, it's hard to get this right when you're not using a board, right? Because boards have 2 ways of being heard. There's the volume that I'm putting into my mic right now that's going into my audio interface device, and if I so wanted to, would be being captured by a local recording. That's controlled by my gain. But if you have a board, you also have headphone sends. So you have a headphone amp, and you can send that out separately. You can control the volume of those 2 things independently. So as far as what levels you want to record at, you can clip in the analog domain, right? The analog domain is the real world. This is physical equipment. It has limitations, real physical limitations. And if I speak too loud, I can clip. You can't do anything to clipping after it gets into post-production. But if you keep the gain down so that you have room to get loud when you get excited, and you don't clip in the analog domain, once you get into the digital domain in your DAW, in your digital audio workstation, you can add as much gain as you like. Because of the headspace in a DAW, it's almost impossible to clip in the digital domain. So record softer. I like to hit somewhere around -24 to -30 dB. And then I find I can get plenty of additive gain in post-production after the fact with compression or just simple gain staging with your channel faders.
Great sharing. Ruben, do you want to add to that?
Well, Tanner's kind of the sound expert, so he pretty much covered that all.
Fantastic. Let's move on quickly because we only have 25 minutes. The next topic that we're going to jam on is about 3D audio, immersive audio. And you guys put out a great article as well, and that really caught my attention. Yeah. The headline, especially, why a podcaster would like to go broke creating 3D audio like iHeart Radio. Is that something that podcasters should seriously consider about? Starting with Pedro again.
No, it's definitely something that should be considered, and we had a discussion on this, and Roman brought up a great point, you know, in the room today, that it's going to bring a different dynamic to the podcasting listener experience. for a podcaster, that's what you want to do, is make sure their experience is good. So with that 3D audio and actually getting, some spatial recognition and, panning and actually feeling like you're in the environment that you're listening to, it definitely will benefit a podcast.
Tanner?
I actually want to pass this to Roman because Roman's got a pretty good view on it, I think, from the staying current and wanting to test in new mediums. I'd love to hear his take on it.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of kind of being in the podcast game and actually having background in digital marketing, I'm looking at new and emerging technologies and platforms. Like, obviously, we're on Clubhouse. That's something new. So it's really kind of pushing the envelope of content in terms of extreme and really in kind of like spaces like the audio drama. So really storytelling and putting the listener in the story. So I think a good example is like if there's a scene and the two people are like, let's say in a cathedral or a church. So really invoking that atmosphere and making that listener feel like they're there. So, that topic was about 3D audio and binaural audio as well. So binaural, really like multiple microphones, really, dedicated microphones. And Tanner actually wrote a piece about the actual kind of like dummy head microphone that it records in terms of, like a natural recording where like the audio is, like a human, kind of like the ears absorb it because kind of your ears are a natural kind of microphone. So if you have an audio drama, really creating an immersive experience, and if you're starting to do it and you have other shows in the space, that can really set you apart and have people listen to your show over another show because you're creating that much more of an experience in terms of not only the content, but, having people being drawn into the story as well.
And I think that storytellers love to have the nuances of their storytelling, right? Level up all the time, and technology like this are gonna also help to sell more hardware. I think Apple came out with a pair of headphones that are, I think, marketed as AirPods Max, if I'm not wrong. And they do have this feature, which is binaural audio and immersive audio. And that means that, the Apple are driving like so much development, right, in this tech arena in terms of not just the audio space, but everywhere, technology, computers, everything. And if they're going to produce hardware to actually enable this, great experience, great immersive experience, and playing back all these great stories on podcasts, it's going to actually help to encourage more content creators, right, to go towards that direction as well. Because now you have the hardware and equipment to do so and to play it back. And having all these networks that are publishing new shows, which are marketed, as 3D episodes, right? Just like how I did the IMAX and the 3D movies that came out. Normally, those movies are the ones that generated the biggest revenue. So in terms of the revenue aspect, it seems to be another great way for the larger players to make more money, right?
Do all of you remember the first time you went into an IMAX movie screening? And now it's like the normal. Now it's no screen isn't an IMAX screen in bigger towns, right? It's kind of odd to go into a place that doesn't have that huge IMAX screen, and it became normal. So maybe this becomes the new normal. So if it does, then it's important to play in the space and see what you can get in early. It's the same like when we're on Clubhouse. It's a new platform, and I think we've benefited by being there somewhat early. I mean, we weren't there at the earliest, but we've been there for 6 weeks now, which feels like. It's wild because Pedro and Roman and I feel like we're like best bros, and we just met 6 weeks ago. It's wild. It's like we went to college together.
It's fantastic how technology is developing so rapidly, and it's always a game of, like who's the quickest, right? And podcasting is a business. So business is a sport, and whoever is quickest, normally they win. And whoever, don't believe that speed is the essence of the game of business, they shouldn't be in business in the first place, right?
I agree. You speak.
Great. Let's move on. Let's move on to the next topic. For the arming, I think what you wrote in your social post, right? This script, they have this new filler word removal tool. So I thought that is really intriguing because this is another thing, technology that we love, right? They're always developing new tools, new features so that we can consume it. We can adopt it. And of course, you mentioned that the script, if they were a little bit smarter, and they actually perfect the look ahead, the arming. That would help us to do lesser heavy lifting, right, in terms of doing our editing work. So do you guys think that this is one feature that's missing right now and it should be like rolled out ASAP?
So Descript, just to be clear, Descript does have a filler word removal tool already, and it works pretty great. The problem with it is that in the past, it hasn't been too smart about assessing how close that is to the preceding or postceding word. So you might get Dave. And so if you cut that out, you are truncating the audio in a way that you can hear, and so you can detect the edit. And so we had been talking about a couple of weeks ago how great it would be if that technology could just look ahead a little bit and make sure there was maybe like 100 milliseconds of dead air. And before, make sure there's 100 milliseconds of dead air and then cut the And if it didn't, then it wouldn't cut the at all. So yesterday, the reason I wrote that article, or a couple days ago now, is because I noticed something with the new Descript update that when it was after you had made those edits and you went to export the audio, it was doing something called optimizing edit boundaries, which seemed like maybe it was reassess. I don't know what it's doing, but they made a blog entry about it and said that it was saying, they were very vague, but they said we're going to be able to create better edits, better cuts. And so we don't want to take credit for like inspiring them to do that. I'm sure they were working on it for a long time before we mentioned it or before they heard it, or if they heard it at all. But I'm really glad to see it because Descript is, I mean, for the person who's starting out and can't afford a professional audio engineer, and to be fair, this tech is getting so good so fast that the value proposition for podcast editors, if this technology gets good enough, I charge $270 to edit an episode. Descript can do a pretty decent job for $30 a month, as many episodes as you want. And at some point, like that value proposition gets weaker and weaker. Who's going to pay me? Probably just corporate businesses, no individuals.
Anything else to add, Pedro, Roman?
Yeah, no, it like Tanner said, it's one of the new technologies that, again, as a new podcaster and somebody that is getting into transcription and as well as podcast editing, having that taken out and actually not cutting off other words definitely is beneficial when you are editing. So I think it's a great tool. It's something that is going to continue to improve over time, and we're glad to be seeing that and utilizing these features.
Roman, I'm going to throw this next topic to you first. Why is it important for podcasters to be brave, to take risks, and believe in yourself, but don't dismiss valuable input just because it doesn't align with your dreams?
Well, I'm going to come at it from a digital, 13 years in digital. So I've worked in many industries and I've taken things from one industry that people were afraid to do in another and really made it my own and gotten value out of it. So let's say you're in one genre, you're in one format of your show, just because you think it wouldn't work, maybe you're a solo show, maybe you're an interview-based show, just because you've done that all the time or you think that's what works or connects, you can still add value to the audience. And without testing, you never know the result. So I'm a big proponent of testing. And even though you may be comfortable or getting results in anything you're doing, you're growing your audience, present something new. Maybe that will actually propel you to the next level. And you don't necessarily know if you don't test. So, I mean, marketing, I A/B test, I do different things, different topics, different ways in terms of my titles, my descriptions, my show notes, the way I optimize things. So constantly testing and really kind of, I don't necessarily say being cutting edge, but really finding a sweet spot and what really connects with your audience. And I think the beauty with Clubhouse, I've met a lot of people that listen to the show I had prior to, Real Talk Podcasting, and have really gotten great feedback in terms of some of the things I thought worked that connected with them, and then got obviously feedback. In terms of kind of listening, I wouldn't discount feedback. I've had guests that gave me constructive criticism that I implemented and actually made the show better. So just because somebody's telling you something, it may not be delivered as you want, but really think about it and at least try it, because you don't know what direction it'll take you.
Fantastic. Tanner?
if you don't risk and you don't try, then you don't know. I mean, it can hurt to fall off the bike or the horse or what have you, whatever metaphor fits in your part of the world, wherever you're all from. But if you don't get on the horse and try and take the risk, fall, get back up, try again. I mean, like, if you don't put yourself in those situations to fail, then you don't ever learn what you're capable of. You don't, as Roman just said, ever learn what might work. So the 3D audio thing is a great example. Why not try? Maybe it doesn't work out, but geez, what if it does and it's the thing that really puts you over the top? Seems like you maybe should try if you can.
How about you, Pedro?
Yeah, no, if you're failing, you have to fail forward, so that way you know that you're continuing going in the right direction. From a new podcaster, even to your seasoned podcasters, if you're failing and trying stuff and pivoting, then you're growing, and that's where the successes come in.
Well said, guys. I think this is probably like one of this Eastern philosophy as well. This is Japanese philosophy of the Kaizen way, where, you gotta try things and you gotta make refinements, right? But most importantly, you need to start. So I'm fully with you guys. Also totally back what you wrote there in your article, as well as what you guys just mentioned. It's important. Maybe, just take risks, because without risk, right? No risk, no gain, right? So this is something that we all agree on. Maybe the next topic about why you should not start a podcast. This is something that maybe all three of you have a lot of different views on this in terms of the various reasons why you should not start a podcast. What's the number one reason for you, Pedro?
Don't start a podcast if you think you're going to become a millionaire right out the go.
Fantastic. It's like the worst medium to get rich, right? Crypto is easier. How about you, Tanner?
But by the same token, you had said earlier, Wayne, that podcasting is a business. And the reason that I feel it is, even if it's not for you, is that if you have a mission, whatever it is, you want to help people, you want to teach people, you want to bring awareness to a social issue, if you set about it as if it were a business, if you set about it at the outset as, I'd like to make some money doing this so that I can do it more effectively. Because if you have no budget and you can help people, imagine how many people you could help if you had a budget. So to approach it with that kind of zeal, as if it were a business endeavor, as if it were more than just you, the single person, but it were instead its own entity, it really changes your frame of mind as far as how to approach it and what necessary sacrifices are needed to go into it. So why should you not start a podcast? I can't think of a good reason not to start one, but I'm biased.
Roman?
One reason, if you think that, if you don't have a team, if you don't outsource things in terms of post-production, content creation, social, and actually amplifying the show itself, there's a lot more involved than what you see, in terms of being a podcast listener, in terms of actually editing the audio, promoting it. So it's quite a time investment. For me, in terms of the audio medium, as a marketer first, it's a more superior delivery mechanism of content. So I would say always start, because you can reach people in different manners. I mean, I've, did shows and produced shows in the corporate space where it's a direct sales tool, and it reaches people and really makes people or prospects understand who that company is. And they wouldn't do that if they went and read the whole website, because that's not a good user behavior. Almost no one does that. But if they're commuting and listening to a show and a sales rep says, hey, listen to the podcast, I've had people say, they've binged the whole show and now they want to do business because they got an idea of who the company is, who their values are, what their values are, who their people are. And I think for me, like audio, you can multitask with audio and reach people when they're actually doing something else. Obviously, you can't necessarily truly multitask with anything, but you can at least reach them and connect with them to a certain extent when they're doing other things. Where with video, text, and image, you can't do that in terms of capturing their attention.
This is my own take as well. My take is if you're obsessed with numbers, right, then don't start a podcast. The reason is because I think most of us can all agree that the reason why we're in this trade is because we hate math. and we want to escape math, right? So if the reason why we're doing podcasts is so that we can scrutinize whether our chart position this week is number 1 or top 10 or top 100, or whether, our downloads is 1,000 or 1 million or maybe 3 billion. That's like, you're never going to stop looking until you find something bad, right? So I think for those who are obsessed with numbers, they should never get into podcasting in the first place.
Yeah, if you're concerned with what
With that,
one
yeah.
person out of 100 people think of you, then don't do it. We actually, I don't know if you saw
100%.
Wayne, but Wayne, we got a 1-star review on our podcast like day 1, but we also got a bunch of 5-star reviews. Every other one is a 5-star review. So we could be the kinds of people who thought, oh man, that 1-star, we suck. But that's, human beings tend to do that. We see the one thing that's wrong instead of the 100 things that are going pretty okay. So if you're somebody who lets that one thing get to you, toughen up a little bit before you start your podcast, because there's going to be some hater out there that's gonna crap all over your idea. It's because they're cranky, they're unhappy.
Yeah, and it's interesting they brought out the topic about reviews as well. Like podcasters, they get the most idiotic reviews. They also get the most beautiful reviews, yeah. And normally these reviews are just a very minor subset of the majority of the listeners out there. They don't actually submit reviews. And sometimes if we are actually obsessed with numbers, obsessed with reviews, then we're kind of like forgetting why we get into this trade in the first place. Yeah. So let's move on to the next topic. I'm going to start with Pedro for your take. Why did you start Real Talk podcasting?
Oh man. So why on my end, it just meshed well. The stars aligned, and I met these two gentlemen. They're very experienced. Tanner being the sound engineer, Roman being the SEO and marketing PR guy that knows his stuff, and me being the traveling podcaster that is in a hotel room, hotel Wi-Fi, and still putting on live streams and being able to do this for your audience. It just meshed well. It worked out for all of us to combine forces and create something very unique.
Roman?
Yeah, so like I said, the reason we connected is we wanted an inclusive space. You've been in our rooms where anybody can be on stage, they can add value, they can feel like they're part of the conversation and part of the community. And we've been trying to grow that community and have people have a voice. I mean, there's some rooms obviously where people don't get to talk or share, where it's a few people kind of being the gatekeepers. And we really wanted to add value first. And, it's really rewarding when you give people information and they act on it and they come back to the room a week later. I wanted to start a show 5 years. You guys drove me. I just launched my first episode, so on and so forth. So that's like really rewarding for us. And we thought it was kind of a natural extension where we can add more value and incorporate people. So obviously we have segments in the show where we take questions from people from Clubhouse, on Real Talk Podcasting, the website. We have people that contribute information that we view as thought leaders, and they're thought leaders in their space. So really creating a space in terms of collaboration and highlighting people that may have not, felt like sharing, but they are experts.
Tanner.
So everything that these two guys just said is true, but we also saw that it wasn't just that we wanted to do that. We saw a lot of what Roman calls snake oil salesmen, and what I call is just like people who are full of themselves a little bit, and they give advice from very inexperienced positions. So when I hear people whom have no clue about audio engineering giving bad advice, I don't think that they're charlatans. I think they understand something they don't even understand the surface content of. And there's a lot of that on social media in general. And the three of us noticed it very quickly on Clubhouse, where you would have, not anybody in particular, I don't have names to drop to put anybody on blast, but we saw a lot of people who were starting rooms, and a lot of it was very hokey, not good advice. Bad advice, in fact, not just not good, but bad. And this bothered us immensely. Roman would get especially frustrated with ideas about marketing. Like, what are you telling these people to do? This is not right. And I would hear people giving suggestions to people about their gear, or how to treat their room, or what proper mic technique is. And they were wrong. but they were speaking with such absolute authority. It's funny to think about this, but you know Mike Rowe, right? He does
Mike
Dirty
Rowe, yeah.
Jobs. So Mike Rowe recently put out an episode of his podcast I'm just now remembering that I listened to, and it's about how certain people, if they speak with enough gusto, if they speak with enough confidence, they're just right. And there are a lot of people who don't speak with confidence, who don't have a lot of gusto, who don't have like this bright personality to be like a person in the limelight, and they are right. And our rooms, and I think Roman and Pedro would agree with me here, and I hope that you would too, Wayne, that our rooms are about giving a stage, a platform for those people. We've met so many people in our rooms that really know their stuff, and they would have never started a room until they started getting comfortable talking in ours, and now we see them go and start rooms. Our friend Brandon Uccio is one of those people. Super knowledgeable, runs a podcast called Fandom, the Fandom Podcast. Super talented, really knows the business side of podcasting, and he had never started a room. And now I see him start rooms every day. And he's a really smart guy to listen to, really knows his stuff. So that's
I think that's the benefit of actually spending enough time in your room, right? And it's so inclusive. That's why I absolutely love, to be there, to eavesdrop, even if I can't actually come on stage. It's a fascinating, listen. And like what you mentioned about the snake oil salesman, right? It seems to be everywhere now. I think the biggest problem with Clubhouse right now is that everyone is an expert. I thought what you mentioned totally resonates with me. And it's so easy to smell a snake oil salesman. They are the same people that are maybe hanging out in the basement or maybe the ground floor of a conference or a summit hall, right? And everyone that they see is a potential client for them. So these people, you could just smell them, from a mile away. So like we're very wary of that. And of course, Clubhouse is definitely one of the hottest topics. And basically with every keynote speaker who came on to this festival, we are always talking about Clubhouse. So I want to hear your thoughts about whether you think that just like what Anchor did, right? A year ago, they added 1 million new podcast shows as a result of rolling out this Anchor free feature and basically encouraging everyone to just use Anchor to just, easily create a podcast show. Do you think that, the next 1 year we will see 1 million shows coming out of Clubhouse? Pedro, starting with you.
Coming at a Clubhouse, possibly. There's possibly going to be some podcasts that stem from the conversations that are being had on Clubhouse. And again, if you have the time and all the stuff that we've talked about, the time you put in the effort, you market correctly, you focus on the sound for the end user or the listener, just like you're doing in the Clubhouse rooms, then you'd end up, making a podcast and potentially becoming successful at it.
Roman?
So, I mean, one of the kind of hot topics is recording, in Clubhouse, recording your shows, having an audience, things of that nature, which I've sat in several shows or jumped on stage and asked questions on live recordings. My whole thing is I think Clubhouse will always be a supplement. It's a natural audio to audio pairing. In terms of really knowing your audience, getting feedback, having kind of a fireside chats after your show, which I've seen all those kind of things being implemented. But you have to also understand that it is a platform, so it can go away tomorrow. I know Mark Cuban and Fireside Chat's coming at some point, so they're going to be an interesting competitor because they're looking at the mistakes. When you're like first, you're stumbling and you're learning as you go, but people are watching. Other companies can learn from it and then adapt and kind of step and jump in front of those because they learn from your mistakes. So I really think it's a great platform. It's a natural, like one of the most natural communication social medias that I've seen since I've been in digital marketing, but it can go away tomorrow. So I wouldn't kind of put all my eggs in Clubhouse. I would add value, but I've had situations like this with clients, let's say with Google. They said, we're never going to get affected. And then there's a major algorithm. And then they call me, I lost 40% of my traffic to my website, $1 million of revenue. So you have to be in control. Like you control your own website. You control the podcast. You're on your own dedicated host. Nobody can touch that. But if you depend on Clubhouse heavily for your podcast, if Clubhouse goes away, what are you going to do? You're going to go back. You're going to adapt. I think I always recommend things where testing, but always be in control.
Very valid point. Tanner.
I'll say something about Mark Cuban and Fallon Fatemi. I mean, they're coming. And I'm not going to say this is a called shot, but maybe it'll end up being. I see a potential outcome where rather than attempt to compete with the kind of brain power that team has at firesidechat.com, that team's got a lot of smart tech underneath its belt that I don't believe Clubhouse has. So, seeing Fireside Chat buy Clubhouse, gosh, that wouldn't surprise me because they've already done a lot of user base building. And that'd be a great launch for a new product that was more mature and had kind of worked out all the kinks, because Clubhouse has got it's definitely got its problems and its challenges. And there's not that many people working there right now. So I can't imagine they're just running around with like chickens with their heads cut off, trying to keep up with all the problems that crop up every day. And they're doing a great job of it. I don't want to put them down. Obviously, they're a really hardworking team and they've got a lot of talent, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens when Fallon Fatemi, who was behind Node, and Mark Cuban, who of course has more money than some deities, shows up with this new product. It's going to be interesting to try to watch them compete. We'll see what happens. But as far as whether or not Clubhouse is going to birth a lot of podcasts, what I think it's doing right now, as we speak, people are doing it now. They are learning that they have something to offer. And I think in that way, we're going to see a lot more content creators. There's going to be a huge explosion of that as a direct result of getting comfortable on Clubhouse, because Clubhouse is less of an upfront investment, right? Podcasting, you got to get a mic, you got to really put yourself out there, you got an RSS feed, you got to have a podcast hosting provider, you got to have like a show, and it's a little intimidating to approach it, even though the barrier to entry with Anchor.fm and phone recording and all that is so low. It's still a little intimidating to get into, and it's not easy to understand, but everybody understands how to join Clubhouse, raise their hand, unmute their mic, and say some things. And so I think it's warming people up to the idea that they too can create something, as maybe making people braver to go back to one of our first questions. So I'm excited about it. I think it's a good thing.
Fantastic insights. And of course, we are definitely not here to knock Clubhouse, because that's the platform that brought the three of you together. That's the platform that brought the four of us together here right now. And we have to thank Clubhouse so much for, their invention, their innovation, and of course, their technology. But of course, there's still some kinks that they have to iron out in terms of there's still no ability to record high fidelity shows, for example. So that is allowing great sounding shows to be produced out of Clubhouse. But of course, there are ways to masking tape apps or equipment together to enable recording. So then this segues actually beautifully into our next question about how to actually record Clubhouse for your podcast if you can't afford a Rodecaster Pro. Who wants to start?
I'll take that since I wrote the article on it. There are more affordable ways to do it. There's a combination of audio interface device like a Scarlett 4i4 and an iRig. It's a little wonky because essentially it's a mix minusing problem, and it's an audio routing problem. So if you want to minimize the effort, so the easiest way to do it is to have a lightning cable to TRRS 3.5 millimeter, or what some people, I guess, call an 1/8 inch jack as opposed to a 1/4 inch. And that's just one cord. You plug it into the mix minus port on a PodTrack, P4 PodTrack by Zoom. That's a $199 piece of equipment. It's a $25 cord. You plug that into your phone, you're good to go. You can do it for cheaper with an iRig for $99 if you have a pre-existing audio interface device, because the problem is that it's easy to do it one way. It's easy to send audio to Clubhouse, but to hear it, you have to be able to monitor it. Well, an iPhone only has one plug. So that means you have to put some other thing in there so that you can hear a plug, so that you can plug your headphones in and actually hear what's being said. So that just requires more cables, more equipment. It requires a dedicated sending portion and a dedicated receiving portion. And the iRig 2 solves the receiving. And because you can plug your headphone directly into the iRig 2 and monitor everything that's going in and out. But the only way you're going to be able to send the mic to your phone is if you have an audio interface device that on the back has a mono mixdown output, so that you're sending out what you're saying. You're sending the mic output out to the iRig. So you've got like 3 separate cables, 3 separate pieces of equipment, And if you already have an audio interface device, you can get an iRig for $99, and you can get a couple of cables for like maybe $20, $120 solution, $199 solution. To be honest with you, I'd rather just buy the P4 Pod Track, spend the $225 and call it a day, because it's just one cord and it's just one thing. And God, you're going to get all those cables set up, and then your kid's going to come in the living room and trip over all your cables. You're not going to remember how you could set it up again. And you're going to be real pissed. So I don't know. I'm a fan of spending a little bit more money to deal with a little less hassle.
That's a great recommendation. Roman or Pedro, anything else to add?
Yeah, no, recording and bringing your audio in. I'm on the Rodecaster Pro, so that's the way I would end up going. TRRS cable connected to your phone, connected to the 1/4-inch jack plugged into the back, and you on the Rodecaster Pro you actually have a setting to actually bring that audio in, and you're already monitoring your levels. So right there, you plug it in, your mic levels are good, and you're producing right on the Clubhouse.
Roman?
Yeah, they pretty much covered it, since Pedro has the Rodecaster and Tanner wrote the actual article how to do it the cheapest, and so they pretty much covered it.
Fantastic. And I think we just surpassed our 30-minute mark, so I don't want to hold you guys back anymore. And just want to say a big thank you to all three of you. And I really look forward to wrap up this festival quickly so I can jump back right into your rooms and to continue to absorb all great knowledge and all these learning from failures, all these experiences that you guys have been through before, and it's actually remarkable that the things that you're sharing, right? Some other people out there are actually charging, $1,000 for this sort of knowledge, or maybe courses as well. So I think it's great for anyone who is in Asia, right, who are doing podcasting. They should actually check out your room and actually follow the three of you. So any last message for our Asian audience before we say goodbye, starting with Tanner?
I would invite anybody who has gained anything from what we've said here to jump into our rooms on Clubhouse. You can find them every weekday. These are Eastern time, New York times that I'm going to be giving here, U.S. Eastern Standard Time. You can find Pedro at 6:30 in the morning to about 9 in the morning. You can find me from about 3 to 4 in the afternoon. You can find Roman hosting his room at about 10 to 2 in the morning. So for folks in your part of the world, Wayne, that is probably going to be the one that they run into most often because of time zones and things like that. So please do come in, drop in, say hi. We would love to have someone from the entirety of Asia. I mean, that's kind of a broad generalization to say all of Asia, but we'd really like somebody from your neck of the woods, Wayne, who was dual language, who could bring in that segment, because we would like to help those people. We would like to have a co-moderator who, let's say, spoke Vietnamese and could serve that community in some of our rooms. We'd love that. So if that's who you are, any country, I'm not choosing Vietnam for any reason in particular, but come in and introduce yourself and be part of what we're building. We would love that. And then of course also check out realtalkpodcasting.com and the Real Talk Podcasting podcast. We'd love to have you.
Fantastic. Any language that you want from Asia, I can connect you to that relevant podcaster, because I basically have them on this festival during our last 2 editions and this one as well. In fact, if you're going to stick around this afternoon, Singapore time, I have an Indonesian podcaster who is doing his entire show in Bahasa Indonesian. So he could be someone who can help you to unlock, in terms of like the community or those who are, speaking that language, because we know that Indonesia is one of the largest markets as well. I'm looking at the charts for Asia, right? One of the fastest growing market. Number 1 is obviously, China, India, and then Korea and Indonesia. So these are the 4 languages. And if you need podcasters to come and support your room, I will connect you guys immediately. And maybe if you want to stick around for the rest of this festival, you actually find them talking about their shows as well. So definitely, I think you guys are supporting a really educated and also collaborative podcasting space. And we really admire you guys, look up to you guys as people who have done it, years ahead of me, because I only started podcasting 2 years ago. So I have so much more to learn from you guys.
And look
And
at
I
you
think
now,
that
you're hosting an international podcast fest for like 24 hours straight. You're an insane guy. You're crazy.
Asia. I can't do a global one, so only Asia for now. Yes, I do. Feature the best of the West, and of course, you guys are the best of the West, and you guys have to come to educate us in Asia, and it's such an honor having you guys here. And like doing this 24 hours is actually a little bit tiring, but you guys are the fuel for me to keep going. So I'll keep on doing this as long as you guys agree to come on again in the future.
Absolutely, we will.
Thank you, Tanner. Roman, any last message for Asian audience?
Just appreciate the opportunity. And like you said, there's a lot of growth in other markets. So really take advantage, because me personally, if I started when I wanted to start podcasting, I would have started like 5 years earlier. So don't let things or people discourage you from starting. You can always start, and the only way to go is up. So I encourage that.
Really love that. Pedro, you have the last word for this panel before we shut things down.
Oh man, I feel so honored. Thank you, Wayne, for the invitation, and greatly appreciate, us being able to tap into your audience and what you're doing. Such a great cause. And again, anybody looking to start, there is a wealth of knowledge out there. Make sure you vet whoever you end up asking to be a mentor or getting your information from. Again, you always come into our rooms. They're always welcome. We do debate sometimes, but again, it's an open forum for you to gain some knowledge, for us to be able to pay it forward. So greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. So I appreciate your time with us, and I'll see you guys in Clubhouse very, very soon. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Thanks so much,
Take
Wayne.
care of yourself over there. Take care of each other. Yeah. Cheers.